My name is Rebecca Lowell, and I was 34 the morning I walked into divorce court ready to lose everything. My husband wanted the house. He wanted my company. He wanted both of our kids, and he wanted the whole town to watch him take them. His mother had spent 2 months telling our church that I was cold, that I was greedy, that I had driven a good man out of his own home. Most of them believed her. I had stopped trying to correct anyone. Then, just before the doors opened, my mom leaned close and whispered 2 words that froze me in the hallway. 3 months after I signed everything away, every Mercer in that courtroom wished they had read what they fought so hard to win. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we tell quiet stories about ordinary women who keep their dignity when the people closest to them decide to turn. No shouting, no revenge plots, just women who know exactly what they're worth, even when nobody else does. If that's the kind of story you came for, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe, because this one took me years to be ready to tell. I built my business on a folding card table in our garage. 12 years ago, before Grant, before the kids, I had one client and a second-hand calculator with a sticky 7 key. I did books for a feed store, then a diner, then a dentist, and one by one the small businesses of Marysville, Ohio handed me their shoeboxes of receipts and their quiet panic about the IRS. By the time I was 30, Lowell Bookkeeping had a real office downtown, 2 desks, and my name on the glass door. I kept the original brass key on my ring, worn smooth from a decade of opening up at 6 in the morning. People in town thought they knew exactly how much I was worth. They were wrong in both directions. They saw the office, the steady clients, my late father's reputation, and they decided I was sitting on money. What they didn't see was how thin the margins really were, or how much of my time went to fixing other people's mistakes for free because I couldn't stand to watch a family lose a business over a math error. That was my whole life, really. I was the one people leaned on. The accountant who caught the fraud before the bank did, the friend who quietly covered a payroll gap, the wife who balanced a household and a company and never once asked anyone to balance her. I was good at carrying weight. I was so good at it that nobody, including me, ever stopped to ask what it cost. I told myself that was strength. It took a courtroom and a cheating husband to show me it was also the thing they would use against me. Grant Mercer was charming the way a salesman is charming, which is to say, he could make you feel like the most important person in the room and then forget your name by the parking lot. I married him at 24. He sold industrial equipment across 3 counties, and for a long time, we were good, or good enough. The trouble started 3 years before the divorce, when a side venture of his collapsed. He had sunk our savings and a chunk of borrowed money into a partnership with a man who turned out to be selling smoke. When the bill came due, Grant came to me white-faced at the kitchen table. So I did what I always did. I moved money from the business, quietly, cleanly, and I made the problem disappear before it could reach his credit or his pride. I thought I was protecting him. I expected nothing. What I got was a slow, simmering resentment I didn't recognize until much later. A man like Grant can forgive almost anything except being rescued by his wife. He started saying things that sounded like jokes. "You always have to fix everything, don't you? Must be nice, being the smart one." I'd laugh it off and reach for his hand. He had decided, somewhere in that humiliation, that my competence was a kind of control, that every spreadsheet was a leash. He never said thank you for the rescue. He just started keeping score. I didn't see the affair coming. Not yet. But looking back, the night I covered his debt was the night the marriage actually ended. I just kept the books open 3 more years, balancing a relationship that had already gone bankrupt, telling myself the numbers would come right if I only worked a little harder. The signs were ordinary, which is how they fool you. Late meetings that ran later. A cologne I hadn't bought him. His phone, always face down now, buzzing on the nightstand like a trapped fly. I want to be clear about something, because it matters to the rest of this story. I did not snoop. I did not plant anything or record anything or read his messages in the dark. I have spent my whole career around other people's secrets, and I know the difference between watching and stalking. So I just noticed. The way you notice a leak by the stain on the ceiling long before you find the pipe. Vivian Brandt was the one who kept turning up. She was the real estate agent who'd sold us our house on Plum Street years back, polished and pretty, and always somehow at the same gas station, the same coffee shop, the same charity walk. I told myself I was imagining things. Then one afternoon, Grant's phone lit up on the counter while he was in the shower, and a single message slid across the screen before I could look away. It wasn't a love note. That's what stopped my breath. It said, "Find out what her dad actually left her." Not, "I miss you." Not, "I love you." Just a cold little question about my inheritance, from a woman who already knew which curtains we had. I stood in my own kitchen and understood that whatever this was, it had stopped being about a marriage some time ago. It had become a project. And somewhere out there, two people were doing math about my life, my house, my father's money, while I was still pretending the marriage could be balanced. They had already started counting. So had I. Here is what I stood to lose, so you understand why I didn't sleep. The house on Plum Street, where Hannah took her first steps and Cole lost his first tooth. The business with my name on the door, the only thing I'd ever built entirely alone. My standing in a town small enough that the woman who bags your groceries also sits 2 pews behind you on Sunday, and the trust of 2 children, 9 and 7, who still thought their parents were a team. That was the real ledger, the one that doesn't balance in dollars. But there was one more thing, and it's the thing that mattered most without anyone knowing it yet. When my father, Walt, died 5 years before, he left me money. Not a fortune, but real money, around $180,000, plus his share of a small parcel of land outside town. My father had been a bookkeeper too, before me, and he'd been burned young by a partner who walked off with everything. He taught me one rule before I could drive. Money has a memory, he'd say, if you let it keep one. He meant, keep what's yours separate, write down where it came from, never let your accounts blur into someone else's. When his money came to me, I did exactly that. A single account, my name only, never touched by anything marital. Every deposit documented in the same green ledger he'd handed me at 16, his blocky handwriting still in the margins. Separate, one column read, in his hand, keep traceable. I had followed that one rule my whole life without ever needing it. I didn't yet know it was about to become the only wall standing between me and losing everything else. Grant didn't tell me he was leaving. He had his lawyer tell me. The papers arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered to my office downtown so the whole street could watch the process server walk in. I read them at my desk with the door closed. He wasn't just asking for a divorce. He wanted the house. He wanted an equitable share of the marital business, which is a polite legal way of saying he wanted half of Lowell bookkeeping, the thing he had never set foot inside except to ask me for money. And he wanted primary custody of Hannah and Cole. The lawyer's name was Trent Mercer, Grant's cousin on his mother's side, which told me everything about whose idea this was. The letter demanded I submit my company to a formal valuation as a marital asset. I sat very still and felt the floor tilt. Then I did the only thing I know how to do when the numbers stop making sense. I called a professional. Maddie Okafor came recommended by another small business owner I'd helped years back, and she had a calm, dry way of talking that I trusted within 10 minutes. I laid it all out. The affair, the house, the company, the kids. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a careful hand. When I finished, she didn't tell me it would be okay. She asked me a single question, quiet and precise, and the way she asked it made my stomach drop. "Rebecca," she said, "did you ever put your inheritance into a joint account?" I realized, in that pause, that she already understood the whole game. Everything Grant wanted was sitting on the answer to that one question, and I held my breath before I answered, because I knew the answer mattered more than anything I'd say in court. "Never," I told her. "Not once." My father's voice was in the room with me when I said it. The inheritance had always lived in its own account, in my name only, never blended with a single marital dollar. The business was a single-member LLC I'd formed before Grant and I were even serious, with its own books, its own tax filings, its own clean line of ownership going back 12 years. Maddie set down her pen. "Then they're chasing ghosts," she said. "Under Ohio law, an inheritance kept separate and traceable stays yours. Same with a business you owned before the marriage, if you can prove it never got commingled." I felt something loosen in my chest, just for a second. Then she leaned forward. "But Rebecca, here's the part you won't like. The law being on your side doesn't mean the fight is easy. The burden is on you to prove every dollar's path with documents. Their whole strategy is to bet that you got sloppy somewhere over 12 years, that something blurred. And while they bet, they'll make you bleed. Legal fees, delays, pressure." I nodded slowly, understanding. "And the town?" Maddie's mouth tightened. "The town isn't a courtroom. The law can't make people like you." That was the real problem, and we both knew it. The paperwork was solid. My father had made sure of that before I was old enough to understand why. The problem wasn't going to be the law. The problem was that Carol Mercer had already stood up in front of half of Marysville and delivered her verdict, and people had clapped. I walked out to my car with Maddie's words sitting heavy on me. I had the truth and the records. What I didn't have was a single neighbor who believed I'd need them. Carol Mercer did not raise her voice. She didn't have to. She was 64, silver-haired, the kind of woman who brought a homemade pie to every funeral and remembered your children's birthdays. And when a woman like that lowers her voice in the church kitchen, people lean in. I learned the shape of it secondhand, the way you always do. She told them I was cold. She told them I'd kept Grant on an allowance, that I'd hidden money for years, that no wonder the poor man looked elsewhere when his own wife treated him like an employee. She never said, "affair." She had a gift for letting other people draw the cruelest conclusion so her hands stayed clean. Within 2 weeks, conversation stopped when I entered a room. A woman I'd done taxes for at cost crossed the street rather than say hello. Vivian, meanwhile, had stopped hiding. She showed up at Grant's side at a high school football game, at the hardware store, once at a restaurant where she laughed too loudly 2 tables over and let her hand rest on his arm where the whole room could see. She was already acting like the next Mrs. Mercer, already measuring my life for new drapes. And the worst part, the part that hollowed me out, was how alone it felt. I had spent 12 years being the person everyone trusted with their secrets and their money. Now that I was the one being robbed, nobody could see it. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The woman who's good with money is the last person anyone believes is being taken. They look at the competent one and they cannot imagine her as a victim. So they don't. They just wonder what she did to deserve it. Then Grant did the thing I could not forgive, which was to use the kids as leverage. He'd never been the parent who knew the pediatrician's number or which one hated crusts. Suddenly, he was Disneyland Dad, showing up with a new bike for Cole, promising Hannah a horse, telling them in the careless way weak men do that maybe they'd all live together in a way better house soon. He let them believe their mother was the obstacle. I found out when Hannah came home quiet and asked, in that small, careful voice kids use when they've heard something they shouldn't, "Mom, are we poor now?" I knelt down on the kitchen floor so we were eye to eye. I did not cry, and I did not say one word against their father, because I had decided early that whatever he did, my children would never hear me tear down half of who they were. But I made myself a promise right there on the linoleum. I called Maddie that night and asked her how to protect them properly. The next morning, we requested a guardian ad litem, a neutral person whose only job is to look out for the children's actual interests. I kept their school the same, their bedtimes the same, their soccer the same. Stability, Maddie told me, is its own kind of evidence. While Grant offered ponies, I offered the same dinner at 6 and the same lamp left on in the hallway. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing in a current, holding 2 small hands, refusing to let go while someone tried to pull them downstream with toys. "Mom," Hannah asked again at bedtime. We're okay, right? I tucked the blanket under her chin. We're okay, I said, and for the first time, I made myself believe it could be true. The County Fall fundraiser is a fixture in Marysville, folding tables and casseroles in the church basement, the whole town in one room. I almost didn't go, but running would have been its own kind of confession, and I don't run. I wore a plain navy dress and I held my paper plate and I made small talk, and I felt the eyes the whole time, that prickle on the back of the neck that tells you you're being discussed in the third person while standing right there. Carol held court at the center table with Grant beside her and Vivian, brazenly, 2 seats down. I was getting coffee when Carol's voice carried across the room, pitched just loud enough, sweet as the pie in front of her. Someone had asked, with false concern, how poor Rebecca was holding up. Carol smiled and said it like a kindness. Oh, she'll land on her feet. Though I expect she'll be lucky to keep her maiden name. The table laughed. Not cruelly, exactly. Worse than cruel. Comfortably. They laughed the easy laugh of people who have already decided the joke is fair. I set my coffee cup down on the table without a sound. I did not turn around. I did not give them the scene they were half hoping for, the flushed face, the shaking voice, the proof of everything Carol had told them. I picked up my purse and I walked out into the cold parking lot, and the gravel crunched under my flats, and I got in my car. I did not cry. I want you to understand that, because it surprised even me. I sat in the dark with my hands on the wheel, and instead of weeping, I reached into my purse, found a pen and an old receipt, and I started making a list. The list grew. I'm a bookkeeper, so when my life falls apart, I audit it. And in auditing it, I found the thing that changed the entire shape of the war. I pulled our joint mortgage records, the ones I had every legal right to see, and I found that Grant had quietly refinanced the house on Plum Street 4 months before he filed, taking out a home equity line of credit. He had drained nearly every dollar of equity we'd built in 12 years. The money hadn't gone into a savings account, it had gone into a new investment, a property flipping venture, with Vivian Brandt listed as a partner. Worse, to get the business loan that funded it, Grant had signed a personal guarantee, putting his own name on the hook for the whole debt. I sat in my office with the green lamp on and felt something I hadn't felt in months, not anger, clarity. The moment I'd seen the refinance go through, weeks earlier, I had called the bank to try to stop it. But it was a joint mortgage on a marital home, and a joint mortgage takes 2 signatures to freeze and only one to borrow against. There was nothing I could legally do but watch and write it all down. So I did. I documented every statement, every transfer, every date, the same way my father taught me, the same way I'd done my whole career. And as the picture filled in, I understood something Grant clearly didn't. He thought he was loading himself up with assets, the house, the company, the future. What he was actually loading himself up with was liabilities. He was fighting to win a pile of debt with my husband's name guaranteeing it. He just hadn't read his own paperwork closely enough to know it yet. Trent earned his fee by making my life expensive. That's the strategy when the law isn't on your side. You can't win, so you try to make the other person too tired and too broke to keep standing. He filed motions. He demanded the business valuation again, then again. He pushed for temporary spousal support to be paid by me, the supposedly hidden rich wife, to Grant, the supposedly wronged husband. Every letter cost me an answer, and every answer cost me money I'd rather have spent on my kids. There were nights I sat at my kitchen table at 2 a.m. with the green ledger open and my father's handwriting in the margins, and wondered if being right was worth this much. Maddie kept me steady. We don't fight loud, she told me on the phone, more than once. We fight on paper. Loud loses. Paper wins. I held on to that like a railing. I kept showing up to my clients, kept the office open, kept Hannah's hair in 2 even braids before school even on the mornings my hands wanted to shake. I was exhausted in a way that doesn't show, the quiet kind, the kind that lives behind a calm face. And I want to stop here for a second, because I know some of you watching are nodding. If you've ever been the person everyone leans on, the one who solves it for everybody else, the one nobody ever thinks to ask whether she's okay, then you know exactly how silent that kind of tired is. You've carried it too. If this is hitting close to home for you tonight, do me a favor and leave a comment that just says, "I see her," so I know you're out there. And subscribe, so the next part doesn't slip past you. Because the next morning I drove to the bank, and I picked up the one thing that ended it all. There's a difference between knowing you're right and being able to prove it. And my father spent my whole childhood drilling that difference into me, so I went and got the proof, all of it, in one place. I drove to the bank where my inheritance account had lived untouched for 5 years, and I requested a certified deposit history, the official kind with the bank's seal, showing every dollar's arrival and that nothing marital had ever flowed in or out. Then I drove to the office of my father's old attorney, who still kept Walt's probate file in a cabinet, and I had certified copies made of the will, the estate distribution, the deed to the parcel of land. From my own records, I pulled the LLC formation documents for Lowell bookkeeping, dated and filed before Grant and I married, along with 12 years of separate business tax returns. I put it all into one folder, thick as a phone book, and I drove to my mother's house and laid it on her kitchen table. Joan, my mom, 63 and sharp as a tack, looked at the folder and then at me. I opened the green ledger beside it and turned to the page where my father's blocky hand had written, years ago, the dates of those very deposits. The word separate in the margin, keep traceable beneath it. The bank's certified dates matched his handwriting exactly. The thread ran unbroken from his hand to mine. I had everything. Every document, every date, every signature. The complete, sealed, unbreakable record that the company and the inheritance had never, not once in 12 years, become anyone's but mine. My mother put her hand flat on the folder and was quiet a long moment. Then she said something I didn't fully understand yet. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes the smartest thing you can do is let them carry the load they fought so hard for." I closed the folder like closing a door. I thought she meant comfort. She meant strategy. I just couldn't hear it yet. I ran into Vivian in the grocery store parking lot on a gray afternoon, both of us reaching for the same cart corral. There was no graceful way to avoid it. Up close, without the performance, she looked older than her 46 years, tired in the eyes. For a second, neither of us played a part. "You think I'm the villain," she said, not unkindly. I didn't answer. She loaded her bags and then, quietly, almost to herself, she said, "You don't know what it is to be my age with nothing." Twice I walked away with nothing. And for just a moment, I did see her. A woman who had bet on 2 marriages and lost both, who had watched her settlements evaporate, who had decided somewhere along the line that the only thing that wouldn't leave her was an asset with her name on it. I understood the fear. I'd seen it in clients, the panic of someone who runs the numbers on their own old age and comes up short. For one breath, I almost felt sorry for her. Then she straightened, slid back into the roll like a coat, and the softness was gone. "The house is practically mine already," she said, with a small cold smile. "Grant says the curtains can go. I never liked them anyway." And there it was. She had stood in my home, the one where my daughter learned to walk, and picked out which of my things to throw away. Whatever sympathy I'd felt folded itself up and went quiet. I wheeled my cart to my car. I didn't hate her. Hate takes energy I didn't have. But I stopped right then, mistaking her fear for an excuse. People can be frightened and still choose to be cruel. Vivian had made that choice with her eyes open. I'd let her keep it. That weekend, my mother told me a story about my father I'd never heard. We were doing dishes at her sink, the kids asleep in the next room, and she handed me a plate to dry and said, "Your dad didn't always keep such careful books, you know. When Walt was young, before me, he'd gone into business with a friend he trusted like a brother. They shook hands instead of signing things. They ran the money together in one account because that's what trust looked like to him then. And the friend cleaned him out. took the lot, and there was nothing on paper to prove what was whose. He didn't lose the money so much as he lost the proof, my mother said. Took him years to come back from it. And after that, he wrote everything down. Everything. That was where the green ledger came from. That was where money has a memory came from. It wasn't a quirk. It was a scar. My father had taught me to keep my world separate and documented, not because he was fussy, but because he had once lost everything to a handshake, and he was determined I never would. I dried the plate slowly. All those years I'd thought the rule was about being organized. It was about being protected. My mother dried her hands on the towel and looked at me with my father's same level gaze. Your father used to say something at the card table, she said. He'd say the loudest person sitting there usually owns the least. I laughed. A real laugh. The first in weeks. Because I had just spent 2 months being outshouted by people who were betting everything they had, and I was beginning to suspect my father had been right about them too. Maddie laid the whole board out for me a week before the hearing, the way you'd explain a chessboard to someone who only ever played to survive. Here's where we are, she said. Their case has 3 legs. They want the company called marital. They want your inheritance called commingled. And they want the house and assets divided as marital property, which they actually are. She tapped each finger. 2 of those legs, we kick out from under them. The company is separate, the inheritance is traceable, and your documents are airtight. But the house and the cars and the furniture, those are marital, and Grant has every legal right to fight for his share. I nodded. So we fight for the house. Maddie tilted her head, watching me. We can. It's a fight we could even win. I sat with that. Then I asked the question that had been forming since I'd pulled those mortgage records. Maddie, I said slowly, what is the house actually worth right now? After the refinance? After the line of credit he drained? After the loan he personally guaranteed against it? She went very quiet. She pulled out the appraisal and the payoff figures and ran the numbers in front of me, and I watched her face change as the total landed. The equity in the house on Plum Street was gone. Not low. Gone, and then some, once you counted the debt strapped to it. The marital assets Grant was fighting so hard to take were worth less than nothing. I leaned back in the chair. Somewhere in the back of my mind, my mother's voice said it again. Let them carry the load they fought for. And for the first time, I understood exactly what she'd meant. The prize they wanted wasn't a prize. It was a trap, and they had built it themselves. I made Maddie walk me through it 3 times because it sounded too good, and I am a woman who distrusts numbers that sound too good. But it held. The house on Plum Street, after Grant's refinance and the home equity line he'd drained into Vivian's flipping scheme, carried more debt than it was worth. Whoever won the house would inherit the mortgage, the line of credit, and the obligations attached to it. And the company. Oh, the company. Grant wanted half of Lowell bookkeeping valued as a business, but Maddie pointed out the thing his cousin Trent had never grasped. A bookkeeping practice isn't a building or a brand, she said. It's you. The clients stay because they trust Rebecca Lowell. Take you out of it, and what's left to value? A lease and some filing cabinets. Even if a judge somehow called the company marital, which the documents made nearly impossible, half of it without me running it was worth almost nothing. The clients would follow me out the door the same week. I sat in that small office and felt the whole architecture of their plan reveal itself, beam by beam. They had spent months and legal fees and an entire town's goodwill fighting to take 3 things from me. The house, which was a sinkhole of debt. The company, which was worthless without the woman they were trying to take it from. And the children, which a guardian ad litem was already noting they barely knew. Everything Grant was fighting to win was, dollar for dollar, everything that would sink him. He had aimed every weapon he owned directly at his own foot. And the most remarkable part, the part I keep coming back to even now, is that I hadn't laid a single trap. They'd done all of it to themselves. I'd only kept the receipts. It would be a nice story if the truth had set me free right then. It didn't. The town didn't know any of what I knew, and the gossip reached its high water mark in those last weeks. Carol's version had hardened into fact through sheer repetition. I was the cold wife who'd hoarded money and pushed a good man out. I heard, third hand, that she'd repeated her little line about my maiden name at a women's circle, to laughter. A friend I'd known since high school, a woman whose failing bakery I had personally kept solvent for 2 years, stopped returning my calls. That one I felt in my teeth. I could have fought back. I could have walked into that church basement with the certified mortgage records and the personal guarantee and shown them all exactly who was about to lose everything. Maddie advised against it, and I agreed. "Save the truth for the room where it counts," she said. "A courtroom, not a coffee clatch. You explain yourself to gossip, you've already lost." So I stayed quiet. I let them think what they thought. Silence, when you choose it on purpose, is a different thing than silence forced on you. But it nearly broke when Hannah came home from school one day, climbed onto the couch, and told me, very seriously, that a girl in her class said we were going to lose our house and have to live in our car. I held her. I did not promise her the house, because I knew by then we'd be giving it up. Instead, I knelt down and made her a different promise, a specific one, looking right in her eyes. "We will always have a home," I said. "I built one once with nothing. I can do it again." She believed me. Now I had to make it true. The week before the hearing, Maddie and I built the file the way you'd build a wall, brick by brick, every brick certified. The deposit history with the bank's seal, the probate documents, the LLC formation papers, dated and filed before the marriage, 12 years of separate tax returns, the mortgage records and the refinance, the home equity line, and Grant's personal guarantee on the business loan, all of it pulled from public and joint records I had every right to. Not one piece of it was a secret recording or a stolen text or a diary I'd kept in the dark. Every single document was institutional, official, the kind a clerk stamps and a judge respects. My father's whole philosophy, stacked in one folder. The day before, Maddie let me sit in the empty courtroom for a few minutes, just to take the strangeness out of it. The room was cold, the old radiator along the wall clanking and hissing like something alive, the wooden benches hard and chilly under my hands. My heart was going faster than I wanted it to. I sat and listened to that radiator clank and made myself breathe. Then Maddie told me the plan, the real plan, the one my mother had seen before either of us. "When they ask for the house," she said, "don't argue. When they ask for the marital assets, let them have them. Give them the fight they came for. Sign it over." I must have looked at her like she was mad because she smiled, just slightly. "Trust me, Rebecca. The worst thing we can do to these people is let them win exactly what they asked for." I looked at the cold, empty judge's bench and felt, for the first time, something close to calm. I finally understood my mother's 2 words. I just hadn't heard her say them yet. They made one last play before the hearing, and it told me everything about what they were really after. Trent reached out with a settlement offer, presented as generosity. If I would simply sign over my interest in the business to be divided, they'd go easy on the spousal support. Maybe even let me keep the smaller car. It was dressed up as a kindness. It was a trap with a bow on it. Because the company was already mine, free and clear, separate property the law would protect. The only way it could ever become marital, ever get split, was if I voluntarily signed it into the marital pot myself. They couldn't take it. They needed me to give it. They wanted my signature far more than they wanted the truth, and once I saw that, I saw all the way to the bottom of them. At the meeting, Trent slid the papers across the table and, with a little performance of reasonableness, said it would help if I'd hand over the office keys as a gesture of good faith while things were sorted out. I reached into my purse out of pure habit, and my fingers closed around the brass key, the worn one, smooth from 12 years of 6 a.m. mornings. I set my hand on the table, and then I stopped, and I drew my hand back, key still closed in my fist, and I said, very politely, "No." Just that. Trent's smile flickered. He hadn't expected the quiet ones to say no. I left the papers unsigned on the table and walked out with my key in my pocket, and I understood, finally, exactly which of us was bluffing. The whole house of cards depended on me being too tired or too scared to read what they handed me. They had picked the wrong bookkeeper. So I made my decision, and it was the opposite of what everyone expected. I would not fight for the house. I would not contest a single piece of the marital property they were so hungry for. I would let them have all of it. The house on Plum Street with its drained equity and its strangled mortgage, the furniture, the cars, the whole shining pile of debt with a bow on it. What I would not do, ever, was sign away the company or pretend my inheritance was anything other than what the records proved. And I would fight, with everything I had, for Hannah and Cole. That was the line. Maddie confirmed it was sound. You give up the marital assets, which are underwater, and you protect the separate property, which is solid, and you focus the custody fight on stability, which you've got in spades. It was strategy disguised as surrender. It was my mother's whisper before I'd even heard it, the load they fought for, handed to them gift-wrapped. I won't pretend I wasn't afraid. Walking into a courtroom planning to give away the house your children grew up in is a strange and lonely kind of brave. The night before, I sat at my mother's kitchen table, not my own anymore, with the green ledger open to my father's handwriting, and I read those two words again: separate, traceable. My whole defense, written by a dead man who'd been burned once and swore his daughter never would be. I was about to walk into that room and hand the Mercers their prize, smiling, while they laughed. And the only person on earth besides Maddie who understood why I was smiling was the woman who'd raised me. Tomorrow, she would lean over and say it out loud, and I would finally be ready to hear it. I didn't sleep much the night before the hearing. I lay in the spare room at my mother's house, the kids breathing softly down the hall, and I rehearsed staying calm. That was the whole job, Maddie had told me, not to win the argument, to let them win the argument and lose the war. I practiced the flat, polite voice I'd use, the one that gives an opponent nothing to grab. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen and opened the green ledger one more time. My father's handwriting steadied me the way it always had, the careful columns, the dates, the single word separate standing guard over 5 years of an account nobody had been able to touch. I ran my thumb over the brass office key on my ring. I thought about Hannah on the couch, asking if we'd live in a car, and the promise I'd made her. We will always have a home. I made things add up for a living. I knew how to start with nothing and build something real, because I'd done it once already in a garage with a sticky calculator. I could do it again. By the time the sun came up, I wasn't afraid anymore. Or not only afraid. I was ready. I wasn't going to walk into that courtroom and try to be louder than the Mercers, or angrier, or crueler. My father had told me how that table ends. I was going to walk in quiet and right and prepared, with a folder full of certified truth and a key in my pocket. And I was going to let them shout themselves all the way into the hole they'd spent 2 months digging. I just had to keep my hands steady and my voice low. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled like floor wax and cold coffee. The Mercers were already there, and they were not nervous. They were celebrating early. Carol sat ramrod straight in her good coat, holding court even there, and Grant stood with his hands in his pockets looking like a man about to collect a check. Vivian had come, of all the nerve, and she was murmuring something to Grant behind her hand, and I caught the word curtains again, and I almost laughed. Trent shuffled his papers with the confidence of a man who hadn't read them closely. The old radiator in the hallway clanked and hissed, that same living rattle, and the wooden bench was cold through my dress when I sat to wait. My heart was loud. I focused on the radiator, on the rhythm of it, the way you'd focus on a metronome, and I made my breathing match it, slow and even. My mother sat beside me. She took my hand. Her fingers were warm and dry and steady, and she leaned close, so close her breath stirred my hair, and she whispered the 2 words that had frozen me in this same hallway, the ones I'd been circling for weeks without understanding. Give her everything. That was it. Just that. Give Vivian Give Carol. Give Grant. Give the whole laughing lot of them everything they'd come to take. And in that second, with my mother's warm hand around mine, and my father's ledger packed in the folder on my lap, and the radiator clanking like a heartbeat, I finally understood her completely. She wasn't telling me to lose. She was telling me to let them win the exact thing that would ruin them. The doors opened. A bailiff called the case. I stood, smoothed my navy dress, and walked in to do precisely what my mother said. I gave them everything. That was the first move, and it landed like a gift, exactly as Maddie had promised. When the judge turned to the matter of the marital home, Trent launched into his rehearsed demand, ready for a fight, and I simply nodded to Maddie, who rose and said, in a bored, almost generous tone, that my client did not contest the marital home and would sign over her interest in it entirely. Trent stopped mid-sentence. He'd loaded a cannon to knock down a door that was already open. Grant looked at his mother. Carol's face cracked into something that was almost a smile. We went down the list, item by item, and at each one Maddie waved a hand. The cars? His. The furniture? The appliances? The contents of the house on Plum Street? His. The savings account, drained as it was? His. Every piece of the visible, shining pile they had spent months and a town's goodwill fighting for. I signed away with a steady hand and a calm face, and with every signature the Mercers grew more openly delighted. Carol actually reached over and squeezed Grant's arm. Vivian, in the gallery, sat up straighter, already redecorating. They thought I was broken. They thought the cold, calculating wife had finally crumbled, had been so beaten down by the gossip and the pressure that she was giving up without a fight. I let them think it. I kept my eyes down and my pen moving, the picture of a defeated woman doing the only thing left to her. The only thing I held back was the company, and when Trent tried to fold it into the settlement, Maddie produced the LLC documents, dated and certified, and the judge glanced at them and moved on without comment, because there was nothing there to argue. Through all of it, I kept one hand in my lap, and in that hand, hidden, I held the brass key to my office, smooth and warm now from my grip. They could have the house they could see. They could not have the thing I'd built, because that was never theirs to take. They signed the agreement before anyone read the appraisal. They signed before the debt figures were entered into the record. They signed in triumph, all three of them practically beaming. That was the whole plan. And the plan was just getting started. Then Maddie stood up to address the financial record, and the temperature in the room began to change. She spoke quietly, almost kindly, the way you'd explain a hard truth to someone you didn't entirely dislike. First, she submitted the certified deposit history for my inheritance account, 5 years of it, sealed by the bank, every dollar traceable to my father's estate, and never once mingled with marital funds. Under Ohio law, she noted, separate property kept traceable remained separate, and the burden of proving it was met right there in black and white. The judge reviewed it and nodded. The inheritance was mine, untouchable, exactly as it had always been. Second, the company, the single-member LLC formed before the marriage, with 12 years of independent books. Separate. Mine. Trent shifted in his seat. Then Maddie turned to the marital home, the one the Mercers had just so eagerly accepted, and she entered into the record the refinance documents, the home equity line of credit Grant had drained months before filing, and the appraisal showing the property's current value. The numbers were read aloud. The equity was gone. And then, the last document, the one that did it. The personal guarantee Grant had signed on the business loan funding Vivian's flipping venture, securing the debt against himself and against the very house he had just been awarded. Maddie set it down and folded her hands. Your Honor, she said, my client has agreed to assume the marital home and all associated obligations. We have no objection. The silence in that room was total. I watched it move across their faces like a shadow crossing a field. Trent grabbed the appraisal and read it, and his confident expression collapsed inward. Grant leaned over his shoulder, and I watched the color leave his face as he understood. finally, that the house he'd fought for was an anchor, that the debt he'd hidden so cleverly was now his alone, secured by his own signature. Attached to a property worth less than what was owed on it. He had won every single thing he asked for. He had won a mountain of debt with his own name guaranteeing it. I sat with my hands folded and my voice unused, because I had not needed to say a word. My mother's 2 words were already doing all the talking. Give her everything. They had taken it, eagerly, gratefully, on the record, before they read what was attached. The judge looked over the top of his glasses at the Mercer side of the room, and then, into that perfect silence, my mother-in-law started to shout. Carol came apart in a way I had never once seen in 64 composed, pie-baking, pew-sitting years. She was on her feet before the judge could finish a sentence, her sweet church voice gone, replaced by something raw and ugly. She turned on Trent first, demanding to know how he'd let this happen, why he hadn't seen it, what she was paying him for. Trent stammered something about disclosure and timelines, gathering papers that wouldn't gather. Then she turned on Grant, her own son, and the things she said to him were worse than anything she'd ever whispered about me, because they were true, and they were cruel, and they were in front of everyone. He'd been careless. He'd been led around by that woman. He'd cost the family the house, and saddled himself with a debt no Mercer could carry. Grant, for his part, spun toward the gallery looking for Vivian, the partner whose venture had eaten the equity, the woman who'd told him the house would be theirs. And Vivian was already on her feet, already moving toward the doors, her face shut like a bank after closing. The judge banged his gavel and called for order, and the bailiff stepped forward, and the whole Mercer side of the room dissolved into the kind of public scene Carol had spent 2 months accusing me of being capable of. I sat perfectly still through all of it. I did not gloat. I did not raise my voice. Not once. Because there was nothing left to say that the documents hadn't already said better. When the room finally quieted, the judge moved to the matter of the children. The guardian ad litem's report was plain. Through every month of this, one parent had kept the kids' lives steady, their school the same, their routines unbroken, while the other had offered ponies and lived increasingly out of a suitcase with a woman the children had met twice. Custody went to me, primary and clear, with a standard visitation schedule for Grant. I felt my chest unlock, quietly, the way a held breath finally lets go. Hannah and Cole were mine to keep safe. I'd promised her a home, and now I could build one. I had said almost nothing in that courtroom. I hadn't needed to. Everything that mattered I'd said years ago, in a green ledger at a kitchen table, in my father's careful hand. The loudest people at the table, it turned out, had owned the least all along. Vivian didn't make it to the parking lot before it ended. I saw it through the hallway windows as I gathered my things, that worn old radiator still clanking beside me. She'd cornered Grant just outside, and whatever he was saying, she wasn't staying to hear it. The house she'd helped him fight for was an underwater debt now, and a man tied to a guaranteed loan he couldn't pay was not the asset she'd come for. She'd spent her whole adult life learning to read the difference between a man with money and a man with the appearance of it, and she read Grant clean through in about 30 seconds. She walked to her car without looking back. Her great fear, the one she'd named to me in a parking lot, the terror of reaching her age with nothing, had just become her own doing. Chosen with her eyes open, exactly as I'd suspected it would. Then Carol found me in the hallway. The composure was back. Hastily reassembled, the church voice trying to return. She wanted to talk. She wondered, in that reasonable tone, whether we might revisit some of this, whether I'd really want the house and its troubles, whether we couldn't come to a family arrangement. I looked at the woman who had stood in a church basement and told a whole town I'd be lucky to keep my maiden name. I reached into my pocket and closed my hand around the brass key one more time, and I felt finally completely calm. "No, Carol," I said gently, the way you'd correct a child. "I'm keeping what I built. You can keep what you fought for." Then I picked up my folder, took my mother's arm, and walked toward the doors, the radiator clanking behind us like applause. My mother was waiting at the top of the courthouse steps, in the thin gold light of a cold afternoon. We didn't cheer. We didn't hug and weep the way they do in movies. That isn't who we are. She just looked at me, and I looked at her. And she gave one small nod, the kind that says everything a whole speech couldn't. I thought about my father, and the handshake that had cleaned him out, and the ledger he'd kept every day after as a kind of prayer that his daughter would never know that particular flavor of loss. I'd kept his rule my whole life without needing it. Today, it had stood between me and ruin like a wall he'd built 50 years before I ever needed shelter behind it. Behind us, faintly, I could still hear the Mercers arguing in the marble hallway, the sound thinning as the doors swung shut. Ahead of us, 2 kids waited at my mother's house with a hallway lamp left on. I took the first step down and then the next. I had walked into that courthouse ready to lose everything. I was walking out having kept the only things that were ever truly mine. The rest came the way real consequences come, slowly and then all at once. Within 8 months, Grant couldn't carry the house on Plum Street and the loan strapped to it. The bank started the paperwork, and the home where my children took their first steps went up for a short sale, sold to strangers for less than the debt against it. The personal guarantee he'd signed followed him out the door and into his credit and his future. A number that would shadow him for years. Vivian had already gone, on to whatever came next. The venture folded. The partnership dissolved. And Carol, who had run her quiet campaign through the church kitchen and the women's circle, found that small towns have long memories and a sharp sense for who was actually in the wrong once the dust settles. The casseroles slowed. The pew beside her emptied a little. People are not stupid forever. As for me, I kept the office with my name on the glass door. The clients who'd drifted during the gossip drifted back, a little sheepish, and I took them on without a word about it, because a grudge is just another debt, and I'd decided not to carry that one. Within the year, I bought a small house on the east side of town, 3 bedrooms, a good kitchen, paid for with my own separate traceable money. Hannah picked the paint for her room. Cole claimed the yard for a future dog. I left a lamp on in the hallway every night, the way I always had, and for the first time in a long time, the home it lit was entirely, unmistakably ours. People in town still ask me about it sometimes, carefully, the way you ask about a wound you're not sure has healed. They ask if I lost everything in that divorce, the house, the marriage, the standing. And I always tell them the same thing, because it's the truth and because I've earned the right to enjoy it just a little. I gave her everything. The house, the cars, the whole bright pile she'd already started decorating in her head. I signed it all over with a smile. She just had no idea. Not one of them did. What everything was actually going to cost her. I keep my boundaries with the Mercers polite and firm. Grant sees the kids on schedule. We do not discuss curtains. My mother-in-law once told a room full of people that I'd be lucky to keep my maiden name. I think about that line more than I should, because of how it turned out. The name Lowell is still on the glass door of my office downtown, a little brighter than it used to be, since I had the lettering redone. It's the name on my children's school forms, on the deed to a house I paid for myself, on the ledger my father handed me at 16. I didn't just keep my maiden name. I kept everything that name was ever attached to. Here's the only thing I learned worth passing on. Walking out with less in your hands doesn't mean walking out with less. Not if what's left is finally, fully yours. That's my story. One sentence my mother whispered. One ledger my father taught me to keep. And a courtroom full of people who fought to win a debt. If this reminded you that quiet and documented beats loud and certain, take it as a sign. Keep your own records. Keep your own name. If you know a woman who needs to hear this, share it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm Ingrid, 26 years old, and for many years my parents told every employer in town that I was a thief. For 2 years I couldn't get hired anywhere in my town, not because I lacked qualifications. I graduated with a 3.9 GPA in accounting. I had glowing recommendations from professors, but none of that mattered, Because my parents told every employer in town that I was a thief. My father said, "Maybe now you'll learn to respect us." He thought he'd broken me. He thought 2 years of rejection, 2 years of watching me scrub hotel toilets while he laughed, would bring me crawling back. He didn't know about the envelope. He didn't know what my grandmother had done 15 years ago, or why the CEO of Mercer Holdings was waiting for me. Before I continue, if you find this story worth hearing, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with what I'm sharing. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to know. Now, let me take you back 2 years, to the day I discovered what my own parents had done to me. The Thornton family looked perfect from the outside. My father, Gerald Thornton, owned the largest construction company in our county. Our 2-story colonial sat on 3 acres, with a garage that held his Mercedes, my mother's Lexus, and my brother Marcus's BMW, a graduation gift for finishing business school. My mother, Diane, played the role of the devoted wife. Wedgwood china for Sunday dinners, fresh flowers from the farmer's market every week, a smile that never cracked in public, and Marcus, 4 years older, the golden child, the heir apparent. He'd been groomed to take over Dad's company since he could hold a hammer. Everything he touched turned to opportunity. Everything I touched was questioned. Growing up, I learned early that daughters had a different place in the Thornton household. When Marcus wanted to study abroad in London, Dad wrote the check without blinking. When I asked about the same program 2 years later, he laughed. "What for? You'll get married eventually. Save me the money." I went to the state university 40 minutes away, lived at home, commuted. At family dinners, the conversation always orbited around Marcus, his projects, his promotions, his future. I sat at the end of the table, passing dishes and clearing plates, while Dad carved the roast and dispensed wisdom to his son. "A man builds his legacy through his work," Dad would say, pointing his fork at Marcus. "Remember that." He never pointed that fork at me. When I was 16, I overheard him telling my mother something I've never forgotten. They were in the kitchen, voices low, and I'd paused outside the door. "Daughters don't need to achieve," he said. "They need to learn how to keep a home. Ingrid will marry well. That's her job." I stood there in the hallway, frozen. That was the first time I understood. In my father's eyes, I wasn't a person with dreams. I was an asset to be managed. The summer before college, my parents gave me a credit card. "For necessities," Mom said, sliding the slim plastic across the kitchen table. "Books, supplies, whatever you need for school." Dad nodded from behind his newspaper. "Don't go crazy. But you're covered." I was 18, eager to prove I could be responsible. I used the card exactly as intended: textbooks for my accounting courses, a second-hand laptop from the campus tech sale, notebooks, calculators. Nothing frivolous. The total over 3 months came to $1,200. When the statement arrived, Dad exploded. I remember the dining room, the chandelier above us, the way Mom's face went pale as Dad slammed the paper on the table. $1,200? He was standing now, veins visible in his neck. "Who gave you permission to spend this much?" "You did," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "You said it was for school supplies." "I said necessities, not a shopping spree." "Gerald," Mom murmured. "The books were expensive this semester." "Stay out of this, Diane." He turned back to me, eyes cold. "You'll pay back every cent, every single cent. Or you can find somewhere else to live." I worked 2 part-time jobs for 8 months, campus library and weekend shifts at a coffee shop. I paid back every dollar, kept every receipt, documented every payment. The debt wasn't the only cost. Working 25 hours a week meant I couldn't take full course loads. I had to stretch my degree over 6 years instead of 4. 2 extra years of tuition Dad refused to help with, 2 extra years of commuting from home, 2 extra years of being reminded I was a burden. I thought it was over. I thought he'd forget. But my father had a long memory, and he knew how to weaponize it. Mom found me crying in my room that night. She sat on the edge of my bed, stroked my hair, and said, "Your father just wants to teach you the value of money. He loves you. Don't be angry." I wanted to believe her. That was my mistake. The only person who ever made me feel like I mattered was my grandmother. Margaret Hayes wasn't soft. She'd built a chain of furniture stores from nothing, started with a single showroom in 1972, expanded to 11 locations across the state, then sold the whole operation when she turned 65 and retired with enough money to never worry again. She was sharp, practical, and she saw things other people missed, including what was happening in her daughter's marriage. I spent summers with Grandma Margaret when I was young. Her house smelled like lavender and old books. She taught me to read financial statements before I was 12, showed me how compound interest worked using her own investment portfolios. "Knowledge is freedom, Ingrid," she'd say, tapping her temple. "No one can take what's in here." She watched my father carefully during family gatherings. I noticed the way her eyes narrowed when he dismissed my opinions, the way her jaw tightened when Marcus got praised and I got ignored. One afternoon, I was 15, we were sitting on her porch watching the sunset over her garden. Out of nowhere, she took my hand. "Ingrid," she said quietly, "I want you to remember something." I looked at her. Her eyes were serious in a way I hadn't seen before. "I've already prepared for your future. When the time comes, you'll know." "Prepared what, Grandma?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your father can't control everything. Neither can your mother. Someday you'll need help they won't give you. When that day comes, you'll be ready." I didn't understand what she meant. I was 15. I thought she was being dramatic. 3 years ago, Grandma Margaret passed away. She was 78. I didn't know then that she'd left me something far more valuable than money. She'd left me a way out. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting, 3.9 GPA, Dean's List every semester. A professor who'd worked at Deloitte wrote me a glowing recommendation letter. For the first time in my life, I had something that belonged to me, credentials no one could dismiss. The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday in May. I walked across the stage in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, and scanned the crowd for my family. They were there. But they weren't watching me. Dad and Mom flanked Marcus in the third row. He'd driven down to support me, but the three of them were deep in conversation, heads together, laughing about something. When my name was called, only Grandma's empty seat in my heart acknowledged the moment. Afterward, Dad found me outside the auditorium. "Nice job," he said, in the tone he used for the mailman. "Listen, I've got a proposition. Come work at the company. We need someone to handle the books." My heart lifted for a second. Maybe he finally saw my value. "The position is unpaid for the first year," he continued. "Consider it an apprenticeship. You'll live at home, help your mother, learn the business. In a few years, when Marcus takes over, you'll be useful." Unpaid, living at home. Useful to my brother. I took a breath. "I appreciate the offer, Dad, but I'd like to try finding work on my own first. Get some outside experience." His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes went cold. "Fine," he said softly. "Try it your way." He turned and walked back to the car, where Mom and Marcus were waiting. None of them looked back. I stood alone in the parking lot, still holding my diploma, and told myself I'd made the right choice. I had no idea that his silence was a declaration of war. The rejection letters started coming within weeks. First, the accounting firm downtown, Miller and Associates. I'd interviewed beautifully. The hiring manager had smiled, shaken my hand, said they'd be in touch soon. 2 days later, "We've decided to go with another candidate." I applied to the regional bank next. Same thing. Great interview, warm reception, then silence followed by a form email, then the insurance company, the property management firm, the medical billing office, the credit union, 15 applications, 15 interviews, 15 rejections. I started doubting myself. Maybe my resume wasn't strong enough. Maybe I'd said something wrong. Maybe I was overestimating my abilities. I spent nights revising my cover letters, practicing interview answers in the mirror, reading career advice blogs until my eyes burned. Nothing changed. One afternoon, I walked into Patterson Financial Services for what felt like my 20th interview. The HR manager, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, listened to my answers, nodded along, and then paused. She looked at me for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Miss Thornton, she said slowly, I'm going to tell you something I probably shouldn't. My stomach tightened. You seem like a lovely young woman. Qualified, professional. She hesitated. But I think you should talk to your father. My father? Why? She pressed her lips together, clearly uncomfortable. I can't say more than that. Just ask him. Ask him why no one in this town will hire you. She stood, signaling the interview was over. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. A cold certainty was forming in my chest, something I didn't want to believe. But I had to know. That night I confronted my father, and what he told me changed everything. I found him in his study, sitting behind the mahogany desk he'd imported from England. A glass of scotch sweated on a leather coaster beside him. Dad, I need to talk to you. He didn't look up from his papers. Make it quick. Why can't I get a job? That made him look up. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth, and in that moment, I knew. You called them, I whispered. You called all of them. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his scotch. I told them the truth. What truth? That you're a thief. He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. That you stole $1,200 from your own family, that you can't be trusted with money. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I paid that back. Every cent. You know I paid that back. Did you? He shrugged. That's not how I remember it. Dad, my voice cracked. Those were textbooks. You said I could. What I remember, he interrupted, is my daughter stealing from me. And I think potential employers deserve to know what kind of person they'd be hiring. My mother appeared in the doorway, twisting her hands. Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or the ghost of the woman she used to be before 30 years with Gerald wore her down. Gerald, maybe we should… Diane, this is between me and Ingrid. She flinched. For a split second her eyes met mine and I saw it. She knew this was wrong. She knew. But she looked away, retreating into silence like she always did. That hurt almost more than Dad's cruelty. He was a monster. She was a witness who chose not to see. I stared at him, tears burning behind my eyes. Why? Why would you do this to me? He stood slowly, walked around the desk and stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell the scotch on his breath. Because you needed to learn respect, he said quietly. You turned down my offer. You thought you could make it without this family. Without me, he smiled. Maybe now you understand. You can't. Come home, Mom said softly from the doorway. Work for your father. This can all go away. I looked between them, my mother's pleading face, my father's cold satisfaction, and I understood. This wasn't about respect. This was about control. In a small town, gossip travels faster than truth. Within weeks, I felt the shift everywhere I went. At the grocery store, neighbors who'd known me since childhood suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. At church, conversations stopped when I walked past. The woman at the dry cleaner, who'd always asked about my studies, started treating me like a stranger. The whispers were everywhere. Did you hear about Gerald's daughter? Such a shame. The family's devastated. They tried to help her, you know. She just wouldn't listen. My father had been strategic. He hadn't just called employers. He'd seeded the story throughout his network. Golf buddies, Chamber of Commerce colleagues, neighbors at dinner parties. The narrative was always the same. Troubled daughter, theft problem, family trying to cope. He never lied outright. He just told his version. And in a town where Thornton Construction had built half the commercial buildings, his version was the only one that mattered. Marcus made it worse. I ran into him at the coffee shop one morning, one of my old part-time jobs. He was with friends, guys I vaguely recognized from his fraternity days. Hey, little sister, he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Still looking for work? I heard Dad might have an opening. Oh, wait, he laughed. You'd probably steal from the register. His friends snickered. I left my coffee on the counter and walked out, face burning. At home that night, I looked at my bank account. $3,000 in savings. Rent was due in 2 weeks on my tiny studio apartment. I had maybe 2 months before I'd be completely broke. 2 months before I'd have no choice but to crawl back to my father's house and accept whatever crumbs he offered. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. The Willow Inn sat on the edge of town, a modest hotel that mostly served traveling salesmen and families visiting the nearby state park. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hiring. The job listing said, housekeeping staff needed, no experience necessary. No experience necessary, no references required. I applied online at 2 in the morning when the shame felt less sharp. 2 days later, I was standing in the employee break room filling out paperwork. The manager was a woman named Linda Crawford, mid-40s, no nonsense, with the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd seen plenty of hard luck stories walk through her door. She looked at my application, then at me. Accounting degree, she said flatly. GPA 3.9, and you want to clean hotel rooms? Yes, ma'am. Why? I could have lied, made up something about wanting experience in hospitality. But I was so tired of lies. Because no one else will hire me, I said, and I need to eat. She studied me for a long moment. I wondered if she'd heard the rumors, if she'd call my father for a reference and this door would slam shut too. Instead, she nodded once. I don't care what people say about you, Miss Thornton. I care whether you show up on time and do your job. She slid a uniform across the desk, pale blue polyester, the kind that wrinkles if you look at it wrong. Shift starts at 6 a.m. Don't be late. I took the uniform with hands that weren't quite steady. Thank you, I managed. You won't regret this. She almost smiled. We'll see. Minimum wage, night shifts, scrubbing toilets and changing sheets, while people who used to respect me pretended not to see me in the hallways. But it was work. It was survival, and my father couldn't touch it. 6 months into my housekeeping job, my family decided to have dinner at the Willow Inn. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. It was a Friday evening. I was pushing my supply cart down the service corridor when I heard a familiar laugh, my father's booming, self-satisfied bark that I'd learned to dread. I froze, pressed myself against the wall, peeked around the corner. There they were, being seated in the hotel restaurant, Dad in his charcoal Tom Ford suit, Mom in pearls, Marcus checking his phone, bored already. The hostess was leading them to a window table, right in my sightline. I should have stayed hidden. I should have switched floors, asked another housekeeper to cover. But before I could move, my father's eyes found me. The cart, the uniform, the yellow rubber gloves on my hands. His face split into the widest grin I'd ever seen. Well, well, he nudged my mother, pointed directly at me. Diane, look, our daughter found her calling. Mom's face flickered, shame maybe, or something else I couldn't read. Marcus just laughed. Hey, Ingrid, my brother called across the restaurant, loud enough for every guest to hear. Missed a spot in room 204. Several diners turned to look. Some recognized me. I saw the whispers start. I stood there in my wrinkled polyester uniform, holding a toilet brush, while my family watched from their white tablecloth table with their crystal water glasses and their Rolex watches. My father raised his wineglass toward me in a mock toast. Maybe now, he said, just loud enough to carry, you'll finally learn to respect us. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just turned around and pushed my cart back down the corridor. But something hardened inside me that night. I remembered what Grandma had said. When the time comes, you'll know. When, I wondered. When? 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, I was cleaning out a box of old things from my closet, trying to sell whatever I could to make rent, when I found my old phone. The screen was cracked, battery dead. I'd upgraded a year ago and forgotten about it. For some reason, I plugged it in. The phone buzzed to life, and notifications flooded the screen. Old texts from college friends I'd lost touch with, spam emails, and one voicemail. From 3 years ago, right after Grandma died. I pressed play, heart suddenly pounding. Miss Thornton, this is Walter Henderson from Henderson and Associates Law Firm. The voice was professional, measured. I'm calling regarding the estate of Margaret Hayes. There are some documents pertaining to her will that require your attention. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. The message ended. 2 years. I'd missed this call 2 years ago. I remembered that time. The fog of grief after Grandma's funeral. I hadn't been checking messages. I'd assumed her estate was straightforward. Dad had told us she'd left everything to charity, with small gifts for each grandchild. Nothing significant, he'd said dismissively. Your grandmother was always sentimental. I'd believed him. I grabbed my current phone and dialed the law firm. A receptionist answered. Henderson and Associates, how may I direct your call? I'm trying to reach Walter Henderson. He contacted me about my grandmother's estate. Margaret Hayes? A pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson retired last year due to health issues. His cases were transferred to various attorneys. Another pause, keyboard clicking. I see a note here that Mr. Henderson attempted to reach you multiple times. The file indicates the calls went unanswered and your father, Gerald Thornton, eventually contacted the office and said you weren't interested in pursuing the matter. My blood ran cold. My father said what? I'm just reading the notes, ma'am. It says family representative confirmed beneficiary declined further contact. Dad had intercepted it. He'd told them I wasn't interested. Can you tell me where the case was transferred? I'd need to check our records. Can you leave your number? Transferred where? To whom? I'd need to check our records. Can you leave your number? I gave her my information, but something told me I wouldn't hear back. The trail had gone cold. But now I knew. There was something in Grandma's estate that Dad hadn't told me about. Something he didn't want me to find. A month later, my father called. I almost didn't answer, but something, maybe desperation, maybe hope that things could still change, made me pick up. Ingrid. His voice was warm, too warm. How are you? Fine, Dad. Listen, I've been thinking. This has gone on long enough. Your mother misses you. I miss you. He paused. Come home. I stared at the water stain on my ceiling, the one I couldn't afford to fix. Come home and do what? Work at the company. We need help with bookkeeping. I'll pay you. Not much at first, but something. You'll live with us, save money, get back on your feet. It sounded almost reasonable. Almost. And the job hunting? The things you told everyone about me? Water under the bridge. Come home and I'll make some calls, clear things up. And if I don't? His tone shifted. The warmth drained out like someone had pulled a plug. Then you can keep scrubbing toilets until you wise up. Your choice. I closed my eyes. I need to think about it. Don't think too long. This offer won't last forever. He hung up. That night, my mother called separately. Her voice soft, pleading. Please, Ingrid, just come home. Stop being stubborn. Your father only wants what's best for you. Does he, Mom? Or does he just want to control me? That's unfair. He's your father. He loves you in his own way. His way is destroying my life. Silence. Then quietly, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I hung up without saying goodbye. Marcus texted an hour later. Just give up already, sis. You're embarrassing yourself and us. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and started applying to jobs outside our town. Far outside. Places where the Thornton name meant nothing. I had to escape. 2 weeks later, I learned exactly what my father had planned for me. I was working the late shift at the Willow Inn, restocking supplies in the second-floor closet, when voices drifted from the restaurant below. The ventilation ducts carried sound in strange ways, a design flaw I'd learned to ignore. But then I heard my father's name, and then I heard mine. I crept closer to the vent, pressing my ear against the metal grate. Tell you, Richard, it's perfect timing. Dad's voice, jovial, confident. Your son's looking to settle down, my daughter needs stability. Merge the families, merge the businesses. Thornton Construction and Palmer Plumbing. We dominate the county. A second voice, older, gruff. She's the one who's been causing trouble? The theft thing? That's handled. She's almost ready to come home. Another few months of this, Dad laughed. And she'll agree to anything, including meeting your boy. My blood turned to ice. So what? An arranged marriage? I prefer strategic alliance. But yes, she'll do what she's told. By the time I'm done, she won't have any other options. The other man chuckled. Gerald, you're a piece of work. All right, let's talk numbers. Their conversation shifted to business details. I didn't hear any of it. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor of the supply closet, surrounded by toilet paper and bleach, my heart hammering against my ribs. He wasn't just trying to control me. He was planning to sell me. A business arrangement. A merger sealed with his daughter's future. I thought about Grandma Margaret, her warning, her promise that she'd prepared something. I didn't know what she'd left me or how to find it, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I could not stay in this town, no matter what it cost me. I started applying to companies in cities I'd never visited, places where my father's influence couldn't reach. Chicago, Denver, Atlanta, anywhere far enough that a small-town construction company owner's gossip wouldn't matter. The rejections piled up. Some companies wanted references I couldn't provide. Others questioned the 2-year gap in my employment history. How do you explain, my father sabotaged my career because I wouldn't be his unpaid servant? I tried honesty a few times. It never went well. That sounds like a complicated family situation, one HR manager said diplomatically, which was corporate speak for "we don't want your drama." After weeks of nothing, I'd almost given up hope. Then the email arrived. Subject: Interview. Invitation: Mercer Holdings. I had to read it 3 times before I believed it was real. Dear Ms. Thornton, we have reviewed your application and would like to invite you for an in-person interview at our headquarters. Please note that this interview will be conducted by our CEO, Mr. Daniel Mercer, personally. This is an unusual request, but Mr. Mercer has expressed specific interest in meeting with you. Please confirm your availability. Mercer Holdings. I'd applied on a whim. They were the largest financial firm in 3 states, way above my experience level. I'd never expected a response. And the CEO wanted to meet me personally? That didn't make sense. CEOs didn't interview entry-level accountants. I almost deleted the email, convinced it was spam or some cruel joke. But something made me pause. Grandma's voice in my head. When the time comes, you'll know. I hit reply before I could talk myself out of it. Dear Sir or Madam, I'm available at your earliest convenience. 2 days later, I was on a bus to the city, wearing a second-hand navy suit I'd found at Goodwill, with $47 in my pocket and no idea what was waiting for me. The night before my interview, I stayed in a budget motel near the bus station. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and old cigarettes. The mattress sagged in the middle. But it was clean, and it was mine, and tomorrow might change everything. I hung my Goodwill suit in the bathroom, letting the steam from the shower work out the wrinkles. I polished my only pair of heels, black, scuffed at the toes, but presentable if no one looked too close. I practiced interview answers until midnight. Tell me about yourself. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting. I'm detail-oriented, hardworking, and eager to contribute to a team that values integrity. Why do you want to work at Mercer Holdings? Your company's reputation for ethical financial practices aligns with my personal values. I want to grow with an organization that does things right. Why the 2-year gap in your employment? That one I practiced 10 different ways. None of them felt right. Linda, my manager at the hotel, had given me the day off without question. Go get your life back, she'd said, pressing a crumpled $20 bill into my hand. You don't belong here, Ingrid. You never did. I'd cried in the break room. She'd pretended not to notice. As I lay in that motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, I thought about Grandma, about her promise, about the lawyer's call I'd missed. What had she left me? Why did this CEO want to meet me personally? I fell asleep with questions circling my mind like restless birds. In the morning, I put on my second-hand suit, took a deep breath, and walked toward whatever was waiting. I didn't know it yet, but Grandma was about to keep her promise. Before I tell you what happened at Mercer Holdings, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you? If this story is bringing up memories for you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you want to know what was in that envelope, the one my grandmother left 15 years ago, keep watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The morning of my interview, my phone rang. I was walking toward the Mercer Holdings building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that made me feel very small in my Goodwill suit. When I saw the caller ID, Dad. My thumb hovered over the ignore button, but something made me answer. Ingrid. His voice was flat, cold.
I hear you have an interview today. My stomach dropped. How do you know that? Marcus follows your little social media accounts. Very careless of you, tagging your location at the bus station, buying a ticket to the city. He did some digging, figured out which companies you'd applied to. I'd made one post, one cautiously optimistic Instagram story about new beginnings. I hadn't mentioned Mercer Holdings by name, but I'd tagged the bus station. Marcus must have checked which financial firms were in that city, cross-referenced with job postings. Stupid. So stupid. It doesn't matter, Dad. This is none of your... I know people in finance, Ingrid. The industry is smaller than you think. He let that hang in the air. One phone call. That's all it takes. You wouldn't? Try me. Or better yet, come home now and stop this foolishness. Last chance. I was standing on the sidewalk, 50 feet from the building that might save my life, and my father was trying to burn it down from 300 miles away. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. You're done, sis. Dad already called them. Enjoy the bus ride home. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I looked up at the Mercer Holdings tower. 26 floors of glass reflecting the morning sun. Maybe he'd already poisoned this well, too. Maybe I was walking into another rejection. Another door slammed in my face, but I'd come too far to turn back. I silenced my phone, straightened my second-hand suit, and walked through the front door. Whatever was waiting for me, I'd face it standing up. The lobby of Mercer Holdings was everything my life wasn't. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, a 3-story atrium with modern art installations suspended from cables, men and women in designer suits crossing purposefully toward elevators, their heels clicking in sharp rhythms. I approached the reception desk, acutely aware of my scuffed shoes and second-hand blazer. Ingrid Thornton, I have an interview. The receptionist, blonde, immaculate, wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent, typed something into her computer. Then she looked up with an expression I couldn't read. Yes, Miss Thornton, you're expected. A pause. Mr. Mercer will see you personally in his office. 26th floor. The CEO's office? That's correct. She handed me a visitor badge. Take the private elevator on your left. His assistant will meet you. I walked toward the elevator in a daze. This didn't make sense. CEOs didn't conduct entry-level interviews. There had to be a mistake. Or my father's call had worked, and this was some elaborate humiliation I couldn't see coming. The elevator rose silently, 26 floors in what felt like seconds. The doors opened onto a reception area that screamed money. Original artwork on the walls, furniture that looked handcrafted, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city that made my breath catch. An assistant in a charcoal dress approached. Miss Thornton, Mr. Mercer is waiting. She led me down a hallway lined with photographs, the history of the company, I guessed, and stopped at a heavy oak door. Go right in, she said, and something in her voice sounded almost kind. He's been expecting you for a long time. Expecting me? I pushed open the door, and everything I thought I knew about my life fell apart. Daniel Mercer was standing by the window when I entered. He was older than I expected, early 50s, silver at his temples, the kind of face that belonged on the cover of financial magazines. His suit was impeccable. His office was the size of my entire apartment, but what struck me most was his expression. He wasn't looking at me like a job candidate. He was looking at me like he'd been waiting for this moment for years. Miss Thornton. His voice was warm. Please, sit down. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my heart hammering. Mr. Mercer, I'm not sure why. He held up a hand. Before we begin, I need to give you something. He walked to a safe built into the wall, a vintage Mosler, polished brass, and entered a combination. This should explain everything. He pulled out a yellowed envelope. I couldn't move. The envelope was thick, sealed with wax that had aged to amber. On the front, in handwriting I would recognize anywhere, were the words, only to be opened when Margaret Hayes has passed away and her granddaughter Ingrid Thornton comes for an interview at Mercer Holdings. The date beneath it, 15 years ago. I was 11 when she wrote this. Your grandmother, Daniel said softly, placing it in my trembling hands, was the first person who ever believed in me. 20 years ago, I was nobody. A kid with a business plan and no money. Margaret Hayes wrote me a check for $200,000 when every bank in the state had said no. She made me promise one thing, he continued. She said, "Someday a young woman named Ingrid Thornton will need a job. She might apply to your company. When she does, and she will, give her this envelope." I set up a flag in our HR system 15 years ago. Your name, your social security number. The moment your application came through, I was notified. 15 years. He'd been waiting 15 years for an application that might never come. Tears were blurring my vision. She told me, "Someday my granddaughter will need a safe place. When she comes to you, and she will, give her this." I didn't understand then. He paused. I understand now. "Grandma," I whispered, staring at the envelope. She'd known. 15 years ago, she'd known. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I broke the wax seal. Daniel stepped back, giving me space. The office was silent except for the soft rustle of old paper. Inside were 3 items. First, a letter, handwritten on cream-colored stationery, Grandma's elegant script flowing across the pages. Second, a certificate, official, notarized, bearing the Mercer Holdings logo and a date from 20 years ago. I scanned the text and felt the room tilt. Certificate of stock ownership, Ingrid Marie Thornton. Shares, 8% founding stake. Mercer Holdings, LLC. I read it twice. 3 times. "I don't understand," I whispered. Daniel pulled up a chair beside me. "When your grandmother invested in my company, she didn't want the shares in her name. She put them in trust for you, her then 6-year-old granddaughter. Legally, irrevocably yours." "But why didn't anyone tell me?" "The trust was structured to remain silent until either Margaret passed away or you came to this company seeking employment, whichever came first. She designed it that way." He paused. "She wanted to make sure no one could take it from you, not even your father." The third item, a small leather journal, its pages yellowed and soft with age. I opened it. Inside were notes, dates and observations spanning decades. October 1998. Gerald screamed at Diane about household spending. Diane cried for 2 hours. March 2002. Gerald refused to pay for Ingrid's piano lessons, called them a waste of money for a girl. June 2008. Gerald forbade Ingrid from applying to out-of-state colleges. Women don't need fancy degrees. Page after page, she'd been watching, documenting, preparing. "Your grandmother knew," Daniel said quietly, "exactly what kind of man your father is. She couldn't stop him directly, so she built you an escape route." I was crying now, couldn't stop. She'd loved me this much. Daniel offered me a glass of water and stepped outside to give me privacy. I sat alone in his office, holding my grandmother's letter like it was made of glass. "My dearest Ingrid, if you're reading this, then I've left this world and you found your way here. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to give you this myself. I want you to understand why I did what I did. I watched your mother marry Gerald Thornton. I saw the signs from the beginning, the control, the cruelty disguised as discipline, the way he diminished everyone around him to feel powerful. I begged Diane to leave. She refused. She believed she could fix him. I couldn't save my daughter, but I swore I would save you. From the moment you were born, I saw something in you, a spark Gerald couldn't extinguish. You questioned him. You dreamed beyond his walls, and I knew with absolute certainty that one day he would try to break you for it. So I built you an insurance policy." Daniel Mercer was a young man with a vision when I invested in his company. "I put those shares in your name because I knew that Gerald would one day try to trap you, and I wanted you to have a door he couldn't close. By now, those shares are worth more than enough to build your own life. Use them wisely. Build something that belongs to you. And remember this, sweet girl. You don't owe anyone your obedience, not even family, especially not family that treats love like a leash. I am so proud of the woman you've become. Even if I can't see it, I know it's true. Live free, Ingrid. That's all I ever wanted for you. All my love, forever, Grandma." I pressed the letter to my chest and wept. When Daniel returned, I had composed myself. Mostly. My eyes were red, My mascara was ruined, but something inside me felt lighter than it had in years. I have to tell you something, he said, settling back into his chair. Your father called me this morning. I went cold. What did he say? The same thing he's apparently told everyone, that you're a thief, that you stole from your family, that I shouldn't trust you. Daniel's expression remained neutral, but I saw something flash in his eyes. He was very confident, very persuasive. And you? I listened. He folded his hands. And then I looked at the journal your grandmother left, at her documentation of his behavior spanning 30 years. He met my gaze. And then I looked at the certificate that proves you own 8% of my company. I stared at him. Miss Thornton, Ingrid, your father just tried to slander a shareholder of Mercer Holdings, one of our founding stakeholders, in fact. A small smile crossed his face. I don't think he's accustomed to that kind of miscalculation. He doesn't know, I whispered, about the shares, about any of this. No, your grandmother was very specific about that. The trust was sealed. Your name doesn't appear in any public filings. It's held through a legal entity. There was no way for him to discover it. So when he called you, he was trying to sabotage someone who, on paper, is technically one of my bosses. Daniel leaned back. I have to admit, I've never experienced anything quite like it. I thought about my father, smugly confident that he'd destroyed my last chance, about Marcus's gloating text. They had no idea what was coming. For the first time in 2 years, I smiled. Daniel leaned forward. There's something I'd like to propose. I wiped my eyes, still clutching Grandma's letter. I'm listening. Next week, Mercer Holdings hosts its annual charity gala. It's our biggest event. Clients, investors, community leaders. He paused. Your father will be there. My stomach clenched. He's invited? He invited himself, actually. He's been trying to network his way into contracts with us for months. Seems to think his construction company would make a good partner. Daniel's tone was dry. I've been politely declining. So, what are you proposing? I'd like to introduce you at the gala as our new senior financial analyst, a position you're more than qualified for, and as a founding shareholder of the company. He watched my face carefully. Your father will be in the room when he learns who you really are. I was quiet for a long moment. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to picture Gerald's face when he realized his daughter, the one he'd tried to destroy, owned a piece of the company he'd been courting. But another part of me hesitated. I don't want revenge, I said slowly. I don't want to humiliate him just to see him suffer. That's not... I searched for the words. That's not who I want to be. Daniel nodded, unsurprised. Your grandmother said you'd say that. He smiled gently. This isn't about revenge, Ingrid. It's about truth. You've spent 2 years being called a thief, a failure, a disgrace. Your father controls that narrative because no one's challenged it. He stood, walked to the window. The gala isn't about hurting him. It's about standing in the light. Let people see who you really are, and let your father's lies collapse under their own weight. I thought about it, and then I said yes. Can you imagine what's going to happen at that gala? My father spent 2 years destroying my reputation, and he has no idea that my grandmother planned for this moment 15 years ago. If you're watching this and thinking of someone who needs to hear this story, someone stuck in a controlling family, someone who's been made to feel worthless, share this video with them, and comment Team Ingrid if you're still with me. I want to know who's here. The Grand Meridian Hotel looked like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers dripped from 30-foot ceilings. A live jazz quartet played in the corner. Waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and canapes. The guest list read like a who's who of regional business: executives, politicians, philanthropists, old money, and new. I watched from a private room upstairs, waiting for my cue. The PR team at Mercer Holdings had dressed me. Nothing ostentatious. A simple navy sheath dress by Oscar de la Renta, elegant but understated. Pearl earrings. My hair in a sleek chignon. I looked professional, competent. I didn't look like someone who'd been scrubbing hotel toilets 3 days ago. Through the window, I spotted my family. Gerald entered first, chest puffed, surveying the room like he owned it. His charcoal Armani suit probably cost what I used to make in 3 months at the hotel. Mom trailed behind in Chanel, smiling her perfect smile. Marcus was checking his phone, looking bored. They didn't belong here, but they thought they did. I watched my father work the room, shaking hands, laughing too loud. He was trying to catch Daniel's eye, positioning himself strategically, the construction deal he'd been chasing. He had no idea that in 20 minutes, everything would change. Ready? Daniel's assistant appeared beside me. I took a deep breath, touched Grandma's letter in my clutch. Ready. Mr. Mercer will introduce you after his opening remarks. You'll enter through the side door. She paused, studying my face. For what it's worth, everyone in this company knows what your father did, what he tried to do, and we're glad you're here. My throat tightened. Thank you. She nodded and disappeared. I stood alone, watching the crowd below, counting the minutes until I could finally stand in the truth. I couldn't hear the conversation from my vantage point, but I could see it unfold. Gerald had cornered Daniel near the bar. My father was leaning in, all practiced charm, gesturing broadly. Daniel stood with his hands clasped, expression neutral, occasionally nodding. Then another executive joined them, a woman I recognized from the company website. Rachel something, Chief Operations Officer. She asked Gerald something. He beamed, puffed up even more. And then, I could read the body language even from upstairs. He started talking about his family, his son, the heir, the perfect Marcus. And then his face shifted, something darker. He was talking about someone else now. Me. I saw Rachel's expression change, polite interest turning to confusion. She glanced at Daniel. Daniel said something back. Gerald laughed, the hollow, confident laugh of a man who thought he was winning. He was telling them about his troubled daughter, the thief, the disappointment. Rachel looked uncomfortable. She excused herself, moving away quickly. But Gerald kept talking to Daniel, kept spinning his story, kept building the narrative he'd crafted so carefully over 2 years. My mother stood nearby, nodding along, the perfect supportive wife. Marcus was at the bar, flirting with someone's daughter, oblivious. This was my family. This was what they did. I felt the old shame rise in my chest, the familiar burn of being reduced, dismissed, defined by someone else's lies. But it was different now, because now I had something they didn't know about. Now I had the truth. Miss Thornton? The assistant was back. Mr. Mercer is beginning his remarks. You'll be introduced in 5 minutes. I smoothed my dress, touched Grandma's letter one more time. 5 minutes until Gerald Thornton learned who his daughter really was. Daniel took the microphone as the crowd gathered. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Mercer Holdings' annual charity gala. I couldn't hear most of his speech through the door, just fragments about community, philanthropy, gratitude for partnerships built over 20 years. Then his voice shifted. Before we continue, I'd like to introduce someone special. Someone who represents the values this company was built on: integrity, perseverance, and the courage to stand alone when necessary. The assistant touched my arm. That's your cue. I stepped through the side door and into the ballroom. 200 faces turned toward me. I walked steadily, head high, toward the small stage where Daniel waited. My heels clicked against the marble floor. The navy dress caught the light from the chandeliers. I didn't look at my father. Not yet. But I felt the moment he saw me. A sharp intake of breath somewhere to my left. A muttered curse. The crash of a champagne flute shattering. That was Marcus. I kept walking. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel continued, his voice warm and clear, please welcome Mercer Holdings' newest senior financial analyst and someone very dear to this company's history, Miss Ingrid Thornton. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. I reached the stage. Daniel shook my hand, leaning close to murmur, "You're doing great." I turned to face the audience. And finally, I let myself look at my father. Gerald stood frozen near the bar, face white, mouth open. My mother had grabbed his arm, her knuckles bloodless. Marcus was staring at the broken glass at his feet like he didn't understand how it got there. I smiled. Not vindictive, not cruel, just calm. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. "It's an honor to be here." And then my father started moving toward me, face twisted with rage. "Ingrid!" My father's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. He pushed past a waiter, nearly knocking a tray of champagne to the floor. "What the hell do you think you're doing here?" The room went quiet. 200 people watched Gerald Thornton storm toward the stage, his face mottled with fury. "Security!" he barked, looking around wildly. "Someone get security! This woman shouldn't be here!" Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying. "Mr. Thornton, I'd suggest you lower your voice." "You don't understand," Gerald sputtered, pointing at me. "She's a thief! I told you this morning. She stole from her own family. She's not qualified to—" "Not qualified?" Daniel's eyebrow rose. "Mr. Thornton, I'm well aware of Miss Thornton's qualifications. You can't possibly— I'm also aware that you've spent the past 2 years contacting every employer in your county to destroy your daughter's career. I'm aware that the theft you reference was $1,200 in textbooks that she paid back in full." Daniel's voice hardened slightly. "And I'm aware that you've been trying to force your daughter into an arranged marriage to secure a business partnership." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Gerald's face went from red to white. How do you— "Your daughter," Daniel continued, "is not just an employee of Mercer Holdings." He paused, letting the silence build. "Ingrid Thornton owns 8% of this company. She's been a founding shareholder since she was 6 years old." He turned to me. "Her grandmother, Margaret Hayes, invested in this company before anyone else believed in it, and she put those shares in Ingrid's name to protect her from people exactly like you." The room erupted in whispers. I looked at my father. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. My father found his voice. "This is a scam," he shouted, looking around the room for allies. "This is fraud. My mother-in-law was senile. These documents can't be—" "The documents have been verified by 3 independent attorneys," Daniel said calmly. "Notarized, sealed, and filed with the state. There's no ambiguity, Mr. Thornton." "I'll sue." Gerald was sweating now, his carefully constructed image crumbling. "I'll sue this entire company for— "For what?" Daniel's voice was soft, but it carried. "For honoring a legal investment made 20 years ago?" My mother had pushed through the crowd to reach my father. "Gerald!" she hissed, tugging at his sleeve. "Everyone is watching. Please!" He shook her off violently. "You!" He pointed at me, finger trembling. "You ungrateful little, after everything I did for you. I raised you. I fed you. And this is how you repay me?" I said nothing. "I destroyed your career because you needed to learn respect." His voice cracked. "You needed to understand that family comes first, that daughters don't defy their fathers." The room was dead silent now, every eye on Gerald Thornton, every ear hearing exactly what kind of man he was. "I made you clean toilets," he screamed. "I made sure no one would hire you, and you know what? I'd do it again. Because that's what happens when you disobey. That's what you deserve." Marcus stepped forward, face pale, trying to salvage what was left of the family's reputation. "Dad, stop, we should go. This isn't the place." "No!" Gerald shoved him back so hard, Marcus stumbled into a waiter. I saw my brother's expression shift, from embarrassment to something darker. He'd spent his whole life being the golden child, the heir, the one who did everything right, and now he was watching his father self-destruct in front of every business contact he'd ever need. For the first time, Marcus looked at Dad the way I'd always seen him. "She's nothing. She's always been nothing. Her grandmother was a meddling old fool, and her shares don't change what she is, a thief and a failure and a disgrace to this family." He was panting now, face purple, spittle at the corners of his mouth. No one was looking at me anymore. They were all looking at him. And they finally saw what I'd always known. The ballroom was silent. 200 people, executives, politicians, philanthropists, staring at my father as he stood there, heaving, having just screamed that I deserved to scrub toilets for daring to disobey him. I stepped forward to the microphone. "I didn't come here tonight to humiliate anyone." My voice was steady. "I didn't come here for revenge." Gerald glared at me, but he'd spent his ammunition. He had nothing left. "I came here because I spent 2 years being called a thief, a failure, a disgrace. I was blacklisted from every job in my county. I was mocked for working the only job I could get. I was told that if I wanted to survive, I had to surrender my freedom to a man who saw me as property. I looked at my father, not with anger, not with hatred, just clarity. The $1,200 my father calls theft was money he gave me to buy textbooks. I paid back every cent. I have every receipt. I paused. But even if I hadn't, even if I'd made a mistake, does that justify 2 years of sabotage? Does that justify trying to arrange my marriage to seal a business deal? Murmurs in the crowd. My grandmother saw what I couldn't. She knew what kind of man my father was. She couldn't save my mother, but she found a way to save me. Not with magic, not with luck, with planning, with legal documents, with love that looked ahead. I turned back to Gerald. Dad, I don't hate you, but I'm done. I'm done seeking your approval. I'm done accepting your definition of my worth. My voice didn't waver. This is my boundary. I wish you well, but I will not let you control my life anymore. I stepped back from the microphone. The room erupted in applause. My family left the gala without another word. I watched them go. Dad storming toward the exit, face purple. Mom hurrying after him, head down. Marcus trailing behind, staring at his phone like he could disappear into it. No one stopped them. No one tried to make polite conversation. 200 people watched Gerald Thornton leave in silence. After they were gone, the room seemed to exhale. The jazz quartet started up again. Conversations resumed, quieter than before. Then something unexpected happened. A woman approached me, 50s, elegant, wearing a string of pearls that probably cost more than my old apartment. I recognized her from my job searches. HR director at Patterson Financial. The one who'd told me to talk to my father. Miss Thornton. Her voice was soft with shame. I owe you an apology. A significant one. It's all right. It's not. She pressed a business card into my hand. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to discuss opportunities. Real ones, without your father's interference. She moved away before I could respond. Then another person approached. Then another. Business cards, handshakes, quiet apologies. I'm so sorry, I believed. If I'd known the truth, your grandmother would be so proud. Daniel appeared at my side, a glass of sparkling water in his hand. How are you holding up? I don't know, I admitted. I think I'm still processing. He smiled gently. The shares, by the way, at current valuation, they're worth approximately $2.4 million. You'll want to meet with our legal team, but it's yours. Free and clear. 2.4 million. I couldn't even comprehend that number. Also, Daniel added, your new office will be ready Monday, if you're still interested in the analyst position. I laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Yes, I said, I'm interested. 1 month later, my life looked completely different. I had a corner office on the 14th floor of Mercer Holdings. Not the biggest office, I was still junior in experience, but it had a window with a view of the city skyline, and my nameplate was on the door. I had an apartment, small, but mine. A 1-bedroom in a building with a doorman and a gym I never used. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table because I could afford them now. I had colleagues who respected my work, a boss who valued my contributions, a career that belonged to me. The news about Gerald had spread through the business community like wildfire. 3 major contracts had been canceled within weeks of the gala. Partners who didn't want to associate with a man who'd publicly admitted to sabotaging his own daughter. His company was still standing, but smaller, diminished. Mom called once. Can you forgive us? She asked, voice small. Can we be a family again? I forgive you, Mom. And I meant it. The anger had faded into something quieter. But I'm not coming back. I can't live under those conditions again. She cried. I listened. When she hung up, I felt sad, but not guilty. Marcus texted an apology. Generic, probably drafted by a PR consultant. I responded with, thank you, and nothing else. Maybe someday we'd rebuild something. Maybe not. Gerald never reached out. I didn't expect him to. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where Grandma Margaret was buried, brought her favorite flowers, yellow roses, and sat by her headstone. "You saved me," I said softly. "You saw it coming, and you saved me." The wind rustled through the trees. "I'll make you proud, Grandma. I promise." I sat there until the sun went down, feeling, for the first time in years, completely free. Sometimes I take out Grandma's letter and read it again. "Live free, Ingrid. That's all I ever wanted for you." She couldn't have known exactly how things would unfold. She couldn't have predicted the specific cruelties my father would deploy, or the exact moment I'd reach my breaking point. But she knew the shape of it. She knew the kind of man Gerald was, the kind of trap he'd try to build. And she spent years, quietly, secretly, constructing a door he couldn't lock. That's love. Not words, not promises, action. If I've learned anything from these past 2 years, it's this. The people who truly love you protect you, not by controlling you, but by giving you options, by building foundations you can stand on, by trusting you to find your own way. And second, boundaries aren't betrayal. I spent so long feeling guilty for wanting independence, for not being the obedient daughter my father demanded. I thought something was wrong with me. There wasn't. There never was. Setting boundaries with toxic family isn't cruelty. It's survival. It's self-respect. It's the first step toward a life that belongs to you. Third, sometimes the help you need comes from unexpected places. A grandmother's foresight, a stranger's kindness, an opportunity you almost didn't take. Keep going. Even when it's dark, even when every door seems closed, somewhere, something is being prepared for you. I keep Grandma's letter in my wallet. The paper is soft now from handling, the creases worn thin. Don't let anyone control you with money. Build something that belongs to you. I'm building it, Grandma. Every day, I'm building it. And I'm finally free. That's my story. No magic. No fairy godmother appearing at the last second. Just a grandmother who loved me enough to plan ahead, and a granddaughter who kept going even when it seemed hopeless. If you're watching this and you're stuck in a controlling family, or you've been made to feel worthless by people who should have protected you, I want you to know, it can get better. You can get out, but you might have to build your own door. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this one, and check the description for the next video. I think you'll like it. Take care of yourself. You deserve to be free. My name is Pamela Seward. I'm 34, and last Saturday, a security guard told me I wasn't good enough to use the front door of my own hotel. My sister Natalie had specifically requested that I be redirected to the service entrance, the one for delivery trucks and kitchen staff. My mother stood 5 meters away watching the whole thing. She smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not an "I'll fix this" smile. A real, genuine smile of satisfaction. They had no idea that 6 months ago, I'd quietly purchased the Sterling Hotel. They had no idea that the engagement party they'd spent $85,000 planning was happening on my property. And they definitely had no idea what was about to happen when the hotel manager walked up to me and said, "Good evening, ma'am. Is everything to your satisfaction?" Before I tell you how that night ended, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment I decided I was done being the invisible daughter. I found out about Natalie's engagement party through Facebook. Not a phone call, not a text. A public post with a photo of her 14-carat ring and the caption, "She said yes, celebration details coming soon." 3 days later, my mother finally called, but not to invite me. "Pamela, I assume you saw the news." Her voice carried that familiar edge, the one she reserved specifically for conversations with me. "The party is Saturday at the Sterling. Wear something appropriate. And please, don't do anything to embarrass your sister." "No, how are you?" "No, we'd love to have you there." Just instructions and warnings. I thought about Thanksgiving 2 years ago. My mother had introduced me to her book club friends while Natalie stood nearby in her designer dress. "This is Pamela, my younger one. She's still figuring things out." I was 32. I owned 2 hotels.
But she introduced me like I was a college dropout living in her basement. The thing is, she didn't know about the hotels. None of them did. Not because I was hiding it, but because no one ever asked. Every family dinner, every holiday call, the conversation always circled back to Natalie. Natalie's promotion, Natalie's new apartment, Natalie's perfect boyfriend Bradley from the Harrington family. And me? I was background noise. What my mother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 6 months earlier, I had finalized the purchase of the Sterling Hotel, the same hotel where my sister was about to throw her lavish engagement party. I hadn't planned it that way. When I acquired the Sterling, I didn't even know Natalie was dating Bradley. But fate, it seems, has a sense of humor. I stared at my phone after my mother hung up. She hadn't even asked if I could come. She just assumed I had nothing better to do. The favoritism didn't start with Natalie's engagement. It started the day I was born, 2 years too late, apparently to matter. When Natalie turned 25, my mother gave her $40,000 for a down payment on her first apartment. "You're building a life," Mom had said, beaming. "This is an investment in your future." When I turned 25, I asked for a loan to buy a small bed and breakfast I'd found upstate. 10 rooms, needed work. But I saw potential. My mother laughed. "Pamela, that's not a business plan. That's a fantasy. Natalie knows how to build a life. You just drift." I took out a bank loan instead, 18% interest. It nearly broke me that first year, but I made it work. Then I bought another property, then another. Nobody asked how. Nobody noticed. When my marriage fell apart 5 years ago, I made the mistake of calling my mother for support. David had cheated. I'd caught him. The divorce was brutal. Her response still echoes. "I told you, Pamela, you don't know how to choose people. Natalie would never let this happen to her." I stopped calling after that. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was just tired of proving myself to people who had already decided I wasn't worth watching. My phone buzzed. An email from Marcus, the general manager at the Sterling. "Miss Seward, I need to inform you about the engagement party booking this Saturday. The client has made some unusual requests regarding guest access. Please advise at your earliest convenience." I opened the attachment. My chest tightened as I read. There it was, in black and white, a list of names and instructions. My name was on that list. The email from Marcus contained a guest management document. 3 names flagged for alternative entrance routing. The first 2 were former colleagues of Bradley's, something about a business dispute. Understandable. The third name was mine. Next to it, in Natalie's handwriting, scanned into the document: "Pamela Seward, sister of bride. Redirect to service entrance if she appears. Do not allow through main lobby under any circumstances." I read it 3 times. Then a fourth. My own sister had put me on a list with people her fiancé was actively avoiding. She'd classified me as someone who needed to be hidden, kept away from the important guests, the real family. Marcus had added a note. "Miss Seward, I found this request highly unusual given your relationship to the property. Should I intervene? Please advise." I sat in my office, watching the city lights flicker through the window. The Sterling stood somewhere in that maze of buildings, my building, where my sister was planning to humiliate me in front of 200 people. I had options. I could cancel the event. I could reveal myself before the party and watch Natalie scramble. I could simply not attend and let them think they'd won. But none of those options felt right. If I didn't go, they would continue treating me as invisible. If I reacted publicly, they would call me dramatic, unstable. Proof that I was exactly who they always said I was. But if I attended and let the truth reveal itself naturally, I typed my response to Marcus. "Do not change anything. Let them proceed exactly as planned. I will handle this personally." His reply came within minutes. "Understood, Miss Seward. I'll be on standby." I closed my laptop. Saturday was going to be interesting. I called Daniel the next morning. We'd been friends since college, back when I was just a girl with big dreams and no money. Now he was my attorney, but more importantly, he was the one person who'd watched me build everything from nothing. They put you on a blacklist? His voice was sharp with disbelief. At your own hotel? Service entrance, like I'm delivering the shrimp. Pam, this is insane. Just tell them you own the place, watch them grovel. And then what? I stared at the ceiling of my apartment. They apologize because they're scared, not because they're sorry. Nothing changes. I'm still the daughter they tolerate. Daniel went quiet. Then, what do you actually want? Revenge or closure? The question hung in the air. I'd asked myself the same thing 100 times since reading that email. I don't want revenge, I finally said. I want them to know that I'm not who they think I am. I want to stop shrinking myself for people who never made room for me. That's not nothing, Pam. No, it's not. He sighed. If you're doing this, you need backup. Want me there? I can come as your +1. Old college friend catching up. That works? And I'll bring some documentation, just in case someone demands proof. He paused. You know this could blow up their whole night. I know. And you're okay with that? I thought about every dinner where I was overlooked, every achievement that went unnoticed, every time my mother looked through me like I was glass. I'm okay with not hiding anymore, I said. Whatever happens after that is their choice. Daniel agreed to meet me at the Sterling on Saturday. I hung up and looked at the dress hanging in my closet. Simple, black, unassuming, perfect. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. By 7 o'clock, the sun had dipped below the skyline, painting the Sterling's facade in shades of amber and gold. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A simple black dress, elegant but understated. No diamonds, no statement pieces. Just pearl earrings my grandmother left me. The kind of outfit that says I belong here without screaming for attention. The valet recognized my car but said nothing. I'd asked Marcus to keep my attendants quiet. As far as the staff knew, I was just another guest tonight. The main entrance glowed with warm light. Through the glass doors I could see the lobby, crystal chandeliers casting rainbows across marble floors, guests in evening wear drifting toward the ballroom. Laughter echoed, champagne flowed, my sister's perfect night. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the front door. That's when he stepped forward, a security guard in a dark suit, earpiece visible, clipboard in hand. Young, professional, just doing his job. Good evening, ma'am. Your name? Pamela Seward. He scanned his list. I watched his finger stop. His expression flickered. Confusion, then practiced neutrality. I'm afraid you'll need to use the service entrance, ma'am. Excuse me? Those are my instructions. The service entrance is around the back, through the kitchen corridor. I didn't move. Can I ask who gave those instructions? The event organizer. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm just following protocol. Protocol. My sister had created a protocol for keeping me out. I looked past his shoulder, through the glass doors, into the lobby, and that's when I saw her. My mother, standing just inside, looking directly at me. Our eyes met across 15 feet of marble and glass. She didn't move, didn't wave, didn't come to help. She just smiled. That smile. I'd seen it before. When Natalie won awards in high school, when she graduated summa cum laude, when she announced her engagement. That smile of pure, undiluted pride. But she'd never once directed it at me, until now. And this wasn't pride. This was satisfaction. My mother watched her youngest daughter get turned away at the door like uninvited catering staff, and she was pleased. This wasn't an oversight or a miscommunication. This was deliberate, coordinated. She wanted this to happen. 10 meters behind her, I could see Natalie near the ballroom entrance, radiant in cream-colored silk, accepting air kisses from guests. She glanced toward the lobby, toward me, and I caught it, the smallest flicker of acknowledgement. A quick look. Then she turned back to her admirers, laughing at something someone said. The security guard cleared his throat. Ma'am, the service entrance? A bellhop near the concierge desk had noticed the exchange. I recognized him.
Thomas, who'd been with the hotel for 3 years. His eyes widened when he saw me, and he started to move forward. But the security guard caught his attention, gave a subtle shake of his head. Thomas stopped, looked at me with something like apology, then looked away. I stood there for 5 full seconds. They felt like hours. My mother finally broke eye contact, turning to greet an arriving couple with warmth and laughter, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just been publicly humiliated while she watched. The security guard waited, increasingly uncomfortable. I could have said something, could have demanded to speak to the manager, could have revealed everything right there. But not yet. Fine, I said quietly. I'll use the service entrance. I turned and walked toward the side of the building, my heels clicking against the pavement. Let them think they'd won. The service entrance smelled like industrial cleaner and fresh bread. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a harsh contrast to the crystal-draped elegance 50 feet away. I pushed through the heavy metal door and entered the kitchen corridor. Stainless steel counters stretched in every direction. Steam rose from simmering pots. The controlled chaos of a 5-star kitchen in full swing. Then, silence. One by one, staff members noticed me. A prep cook paused mid-chop. A server carrying a tray of champagne flutes froze. Chef Rivera, who'd been barking orders at his team, went absolutely still. "Miss Seward?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "We weren't expecting you to—" "It's fine, chef. Please continue." Nobody moved. I realized they'd all seen the guest list. They knew my name was on it. And they knew exactly why I'd come through this door instead of the main entrance. "Really," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Tonight, I'm just a guest. Carry on." Chef Rivera nodded slowly. "The salmon is exceptional tonight, Miss Seward. Rivera's special preparation. I'm sure it will be perfect." The kitchen gradually resumed its rhythm as I walked through, though I felt every eye following me. A dishwasher nearly dropped an entire rack of glasses. A pastry chef whispered something to her colleague. I reached the service door that led to the ballroom's back corridor. Through the small window, I could see the party in full swing. Crystal chandeliers, elegant guests, my sister at the center of it all, Bradley's arm around her waist. 200 people celebrating Natalie's perfect life. I allowed myself a small smile. Not bitter, not angry, patient. I straightened my dress, took a breath, and pushed through the door. Time to join the party. The ballroom was breathtaking. Even knowing every inch of this hotel, even having approved the renovation budget myself, seeing it transformed took my breath away. Gold-draped tables surrounded a central dance floor. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. The backdrop behind the main table read N and B, forever, in elegant script. $85,000. That's what this night cost. I knew because the invoice had crossed my desk. My phone vibrated. Daniel. "In position, bar, northeast corner. Got what you asked for." I typed back. "Hold for now. Want to see how far they'll go." "Copy. But Pam, don't wait too long. You deserve to be seen." I slipped my phone back into my clutch and scanned the room. My mother was holding court near the gift table, accepting compliments on behalf of her beautiful daughter. Natalie floated between guest clusters, Bradley dutifully at her side. Nobody had noticed me yet. I'd entered through a side door, blending with returning staff before slipping along the wall. In my simple black dress, without the Seward name preceding me, I was invisible. Exactly as they wanted. I spotted Marcus across the room. Our eyes met briefly. He started to move toward me, instinct probably, to check if his employer needed anything. I gave the slightest shake of my head. He stopped, nodded once, retreated to his position near the service corridor. A few feet away, my mother was telling someone about Natalie's accomplishments. Top of her class at Columbia, Bradley's family was so impressed. The Harringtons don't accept just anyone, you know. She gestured expansively, her champagne sloshing slightly. "We're so blessed. Natalie has always known exactly what she wants." I took a glass from a passing server and found a spot in the shadows. The night was young. Marcus was struggling. I could see it from across the room, the way he kept glancing in my direction, then at Natalie, then back at me. He'd been general manager of the Sterling for 8 years, long before I acquired the property. Discretion was his specialty, but this was testing him. He approached Natalie's group once, offering to check on catering arrangements. I watched my sister wave him off without looking at him, too engaged in conversation with one of Bradley's aunts to acknowledge the staff. When he finally found an excuse to pass near my corner, he leaned in without breaking stride. "Miss Seward, this situation is highly irregular. Say the word and I can— Not yet. But ma'am, I know what they did, Marcus. I also know what I'm doing." He paused, professionalism warring with loyalty. "The kitchen staff are concerned. Word travels. Tell them I appreciate their discretion. And Marcus?" I caught his eye. "When I need you, I'll let you know. Until then, treat me like any other guest." "That's precisely what I cannot do, ma'am." "Then treat me like a guest who happens to own the building." A flicker of something, respect maybe, crossed his face. He nodded once, then continued his rounds. From across the ballroom, my mother noticed Marcus speaking to someone in the shadows. Her eyes narrowed, trying to identify the figure. I stepped slightly behind a floral arrangement. She shrugged and returned to her conversation. Just another anonymous guest, nobody worth her attention. I checked my watch. The toasts would begin soon. Natalie would take the stage, bask in the spotlight, probably make some speech about family and love and gratitude. I wondered if she'd mention me. I already knew the answer. The clinking of glass against crystal silenced the room. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," Bradley's voice carried across the ballroom. "My beautiful fiancé would like to say a few words." Applause rippled through the crowd. Natalie glided to the small stage, every inch the blushing bride-to-be. Her dress caught the chandelier light. Her smile was practiced perfection. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight." Her voice was warm, confident. "This means the world to Bradley and me." She launched into acknowledgments. The Harrington family, Bradley's business partners, her sorority sisters who'd flown in from across the country. And of course, my incredible mother. Natalie gestured toward Victoria, who raised her glass with theatrical humility. "Mom, you've been my rock, my inspiration. Everything I am is because of you." More applause. Victoria dabbed at dry eyes. I stood frozen in my corner, waiting. "I also want to thank everyone who made an effort to be here tonight." Natalie's gaze swept the room, somehow managing to look at everyone without seeing anyone. Family is about showing up, and I'm so grateful for those who truly care. Her eyes found mine for just a moment, a flash of acknowledgement, then away. "Some people in this room have overcome personal challenges to be here." A pause, a sympathetic smile. "Let's just say, not everyone in my family understands the value of commitment. But tonight isn't about that. Tonight is about love, real love." Scattered uncomfortable laughter. A few guests exchanged glances. Eleanor Harrington, seated at the head table, frowned slightly. I felt the words land like stones. My divorce. She was talking about my divorce. In front of 200 people, including the family her fiancé came from. My hand tightened around my champagne glass. Still, I didn't move. Natalie finished to enthusiastic applause. Before the noise died down, my mother was already rising from her seat. "If I may add a few words." She didn't wait for permission. Victoria Seward never did. "When Natalie was born, I knew she was special." My mother's voice carried effortlessly. She'd always had a gift for commanding attention. "Some children, you just know. You can see their path stretching out before them, golden and bright." She paused for effect. Several guests nodded along.
Raising a daughter like Natalie has been my greatest joy. Watching her graduate top of her class, watching her build her career, and now watching her join one of the most respected families in this city. My mother raised her glass toward the Harringtons. To your wonderful son, and to the extraordinary woman he's chosen. Hear, hear, someone called. As she sat down, a woman at a nearby table leaned toward her companion. I thought there were two daughters. The question carried farther than intended. A brief hush. My mother heard it. I saw her spine stiffen slightly before she turned with a practiced smile. Natalie is my pride, she said smoothly. Pamela is still finding herself. The dismissal hung in the air. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Near the bar, I saw Daniel's jaw tighten. He caught my eye across the room, questioning. I gave a slight shake of my head. Not yet. But someone else had noticed the exchange. Eleanor Harrington was watching my mother with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then her gaze traveled across the room, searching. It landed on me. For a long moment, we looked at each other. Eleanor's eyes were sharp, assessing. She didn't look away. Neither did I. Natalie found me 20 minutes later. I'd been nursing the same glass of champagne, watching the party from my corner. Apparently, I wasn't invisible enough. Oh. She stopped in front of me, surprise flickering before she composed herself. You actually came. Congratulations on your engagement, Natalie. Thank you. Her smile was thin. I thought maybe you'd be too overwhelmed. These events can be a lot for some people. I'm managing. Behind her, 3 of her friends had formed a semicircle. Support troops, witnesses. Natalie tilted her head. You know, Bradley's family is very traditional. They value success, achievement. I hope you understand why we had to be selective about the entrance arrangements. I understand perfectly. Good. She sipped her champagne, watching me over the rim. Because tonight is about me, Pamela. My engagement. My celebration. Try not to make it about your situation. I wouldn't dream of it. Wonderful. Another thin smile. And maybe next time, consider wearing something a bit more festive? Black is so dreary for a celebration. One of her friends giggled. Natalie turned to rejoin her circle, dismissing me as easily as she'd dismiss a server. Then she paused, looked back. By the way, how did you get in? I specifically told security. She stopped herself, but not fast enough. You specifically told them what, Natalie? Her cheeks flushed. Nothing, forget it. I used the service entrance, as requested. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt. Natalie didn't do guilt, but something close to surprise. Maybe she hadn't expected me to actually comply. Beyond Natalie's shoulder, I noticed Bradley standing nearby. He'd heard everything. His expression was troubled. Natalie didn't see it, but I did. My mother appeared as if summoned. Pamela. Her voice was low, sharp. A word. She guided me to an alcove near the service corridor, away from the main crowd but still visible. Still public enough that I couldn't make a scene without witnesses. What are you doing here? Attending my sister's engagement party. Don't be smart with me. She glanced around, making sure no one important was watching. You know exactly what I mean. After everything, you just show up? Was I not invited? Her jaw tightened. This is Natalie's night. Don't ruin it. I haven't done anything, Mom. Good. Keep it that way. She looked at my dress with undisguised disappointment. Couldn't you at least wear something nicer? Something that shows you made an effort? The Harringtons are watching. I won't have you embarrass us. I felt something shift inside me. A lock turning, a door closing. Us, I repeated quietly. Who is us, exactly? Don't start, Pamela. Not tonight. Before I could respond, Marcus appeared at the edge of my vision. His expression was carefully neutral.
but I could see the tension in his shoulders. I apologize for the interruption. His voice was formal, professional. We have a situation with the catering that requires immediate attention. My mother barely glanced at him. Handle it yourself. We're in the middle of something. I'm afraid I need authorization from... Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. From management. Then find the management, Victoria snapped. Can't you see I'm speaking with my daughter? Marcus didn't move. His eyes found mine. Miss Seward, he said slowly, may I have a word? My mother froze. Her gaze traveled from Marcus to me and back again. Miss Seward? She repeated. The world seemed to hold its breath. Okay, if you're watching this and thinking, please tell me Pamela does something, I promise, we're getting there. But before that, drop a comment. Have you ever been treated like you were invisible by your own family? How did you handle it? And if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. I have more stories like this coming. Now let's get back to the moment everything changed. Marcus didn't flinch. Miss Seward, we have the situation with the seafood shipment. His tone was perfectly professional, as if this were any normal consultation. The Atlantic salmon arrived with quality concerns. As the owner, I need your approval to substitute with the king salmon from our reserve. The word dropped like a stone into still water. Owner. My mother's face went slack. Her champagne glass tilted dangerously in her grip. I'm sorry. Natalie had appeared from nowhere, her voice sharp. What did you just call her? Marcus turned with the calm of a man who had served diplomats and dictators. I addressed Miss Pamela Seward, the owner of the Sterling Hotel. Is there a problem? Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Around us, conversations had stopped. Nearby guests turned to stare. The string quartet played on, oblivious, their Vivaldi suddenly grotesque against the frozen tableau. I kept my voice level. The king salmon will work, Marcus. Tell Chef Rivera to adjust the sauce to complement. Perhaps the citrus reduction instead of the dill. Excellent choice, ma'am. Marcus inclined his head, a small bow, nearly imperceptible. I'll inform the kitchen immediately. He retreated. The click of his heels on marble echoed in the silence. I turned back to my mother and sister. Victoria's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Natalie had gone pale beneath her carefully applied blush. Her hand gripped Bradley's arm so tightly that her knuckles were white. The owner? Bradley's voice was barely above a whisper. Natalie, did you know? No. Natalie's voice cracked. No, that's not... She doesn't... Somewhere behind me, a champagne glass shattered on the floor. Someone gasped, and for the first time in 34 years, my family was looking directly at me. This is a joke. Natalie's voice was too loud, edged with panic. Some kind of sick joke. She doesn't own anything. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Guests leaned toward each other, eyebrows raised, phones quietly emerging from pockets and purses. I've owned the Sterling for 6 months, Natalie. I kept my voice calm, conversational. You can verify with the county property records if you'd like. They're public. 6 months? My mother finally found her voice. That's impossible. We would have known. Someone would have told us. Who would have told you, Mom? You never asked what I do. You never asked about my life at all. Victoria's face cycled through emotions, shock, confusion, something that might have been shame before it hardened into defensiveness. This is ridiculous. You're making things up to ruin your sister's night. I'm not making anything up, and I'm not trying to ruin anything. Then what is this? Natalie gestured wildly at the ballroom. Some kind of power play? You wait until my engagement to reveal you own the hotel? How petty can you be? I didn't plan this, Natalie. I bought this hotel because it was a good investment. You chose to have your party here, and you chose to put me on a list. The word list landed hard. I saw several guests exchange confused glances. Eleanor Harrington rose from the head table and began walking toward us. Her stride was measured, deliberate, the walk of a woman who hadn't hurried in decades because the world waited for her. I'm sorry. Her voice cut through the murmurs. Did I understand correctly? You own this hotel? Every eye in the room turned to me. Yes, Mrs. Harrington. I met her gaze steadily. Along with three others. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor Harrington had the kind of face that revealed nothing unless she wanted it to. Right now, she wanted it to reveal disappointment. Victoria. Her voice was silk over steel. You told me your family was modest. You said Pamela was struggling. Finding herself, I believe, were your exact words. My mother's composure crumbled. I didn't know. You didn't know your own daughter owned one of the most prestigious boutique hotels in the city? Eleanor's eyebrow arched a millimeter. Along with three others, apparently? She never told us. I find that difficult to believe. Eleanor turned to study me with new eyes. The Sterling has been featured in Architectural Digest twice. The acquisition was covered in the business section of the Tribune. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Several guests were now openly on their phones, presumably searching for verification. Natalie stepped forward, desperate. This doesn't change anything. She probably inherited the money, or married into it. I didn't inherit anything. I kept my voice even. And my ex-husband is a middle school teacher. I built this business myself, starting with a 10-room bed and breakfast 8 years ago. Impressive. Eleanor's tone suggested this was not a casual compliment. She turned to Bradley. You told me you'd done due diligence on the family. Bradley's face had gone ashen. Natalie said, she told me her sister was what? I asked quietly. He couldn't meet my eyes. Eleanor turned back to Victoria. Let me understand this correctly. Your daughter, this daughter, is a successful business owner, and you had her directed to the service entrance of her own property? Victoria opened her mouth, closed it. Perhaps, Eleanor said, her voice carrying effortlessly, we need to have a conversation about due diligence. She wasn't talking to Victoria anymore. She was talking to Bradley. Prove it. Natalie's voice was ragged now, stripped of its earlier polish. Anyone can claim to own something. Show us proof. I don't need to prove anything to you, Natalie. Of course you don't, because you can't. Because this is all… Actually, Eleanor Harrington cut through like a scalpel. I would appreciate verification. This is quite a significant revelation, and given the circumstances… She let the implication hang. Daniel materialized beside me. I hadn't seen him approach. I happen to have the relevant documentation. His voice was crisp, professional. Daniel Webb, Miss Seward's attorney. I thought it might be prudent to bring copies tonight, given the unusual guest access arrangements. He produced a leather folder from his jacket. Inside were several documents: the acquisition paperwork, the deed transfer, the business registration. Eleanor took the folder. Her eyes scanned the pages with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd reviewed countless contracts. The crowd pressed closer, straining to see. The Sterling Hotel, Eleanor read aloud, her voice carrying. Acquired 6 months ago. Full ownership transferred to Pamela Catherine Seward. No outstanding debt, no partners, sole proprietor. She looked up, fixing my mother with a gaze that could have frozen champagne. And you had her use the service entrance. Victoria had shrunk somehow, her earlier grandeur deflating. Beside her, Natalie looked like she might be sick. I didn't know, Victoria whispered. How could I have known? By asking, I said quietly. By calling. By being interested in my life even once in the past decade. The words weren't angry. They weren't bitter. They were just true. And somehow, that made them worse. Eleanor returned the folder to Daniel, her decision apparently made. She turned to Bradley without another word. We need to talk. Now. All right, we're at the climax now. Before I tell you what I did next, I have a question. If you were in my position, would you forgive your family? Or would you set a permanent boundary? Comment forgive or boundary. I want to know what you would do. And if you haven't already, hit like so more people can see this story. Now, back to the party. Eleanor led Bradley to a quiet corner.
their heads bent together in urgent conversation. Around us, the party had fractured. Some guests pretended to resume normal conversations, stealing glances our way. Others made no pretense at all, watching openly like spectators at a tennis match. My mother grabbed my arm. "Pamela, please." Her voice had lost all its earlier authority. "You're embarrassing us. Stop this." I gently removed her hand. "No, Mom. You embarrassed yourselves. I just showed up." "So what now?" Natalie's mascara was starting to smudge, her perfect facade cracking. "You're going to cancel the party? Ruin my engagement out of spite?" "I'm not going to do anything, Natalie." I kept my voice steady. "The party will continue. Your engagement is your business, not mine." Victoria stared at me bewildered. "Then what do you want? What is this about?" The question hung in the air. What did I want? Not revenge. Revenge would mean I still cared about their opinion. Not an apology. Words wouldn't undo 30 years of dismissal. "I want you to understand something." I looked at them both, my mother, my sister, the family that had never seen me. "I'm not here to prove I'm better than you. I'm here because you thought I was less. And I'm done accepting that." "Pamela," Victoria started. "I'm not angry, Mom. I'm just done pretending." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "You put me on a blacklist at my own sister's party, at my own hotel, and you smiled when security turned me away." Her face crumpled. "When you're ready to have a real conversation about why you've treated me differently for 30 years, I'll be here, but I won't be invisible anymore." For once, neither of them had a response. Eleanor Harrington returned from her corner conference. Bradley trailed behind her, his expression that of a man who had just received very bad news. "Natalie," his voice was strained, "we need to talk. Later, in private." "Bradley, whatever she told you." "Later." The single word silenced her. Eleanor approached my mother with the gracious smile of someone delivering a death blow. "Mrs. Seward, this has been a most illuminating evening." Victoria attempted to rally. "Mrs. Harrington, I assure you, this changes nothing about Natalie and Bradley's relationship." "I'm afraid that's not your decision to make." Eleanor's smile never wavered. "It seems we were given an incomplete picture of your family. I hope you understand that we'll need to have some longer conversations with Bradley about his choices." "What does that mean?" "It means exactly what I said." Eleanor's gaze was pleasant and utterly merciless. "We Harringtons are thorough people. We don't make major decisions based on partial information." Victoria's face drained of color. Eleanor turned to me. Her expression shifted, subtle but distinct. The dismissal was gone. In its place was something like recognition. "Miss Seward, I apologize for any misunderstanding tonight." She produced a card from her clutch. "If you're ever interested in discussing business or simply having lunch, I'd welcome the opportunity." I took the card. "Thank you, Mrs. Harrington." "Please, call me Eleanor." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I always prefer to know who the interesting people in a room are. It seems I was looking in the wrong direction." With that, she glided away to collect her husband. Natalie stood frozen, watching her future mother-in-law retreat. The engagement wasn't canceled, but something had changed, permanently, and everyone in that room knew it. I found Daniel near the bar. He raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" "I think so." "That was—" He shook his head, almost laughing. "I've seen courtroom drama, Pam, but that was something else." "I'm going to go." I glanced around the ballroom. The energy had shifted. Nervous laughter, hurried whispers, guests making excuses to leave early. "I've said what I needed to say." "Want company?" "No, I need the walk." I made my way toward my mother and sister one last time. They stood together near a pillar, isolated. No guests nearby. People had started giving them space. "I'm leaving now," I said. Victoria looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed.
Pamela. Not because I'm running, because I said what I needed to say. I didn't. She stopped, started again. I just wanted Natalie to shine. I wanted the Harringtons to be impressed. I was trying to help her. I know, Mom. My voice was gentle but firm. But you didn't have to dim my light to make Natalie shine. The words landed. I saw them hit. Natalie said nothing. For once, she had no clever response, no deflection, no attack. She just stood there, mascara streaked and silent. I turned and walked toward the main entrance. The front door, the one I'd been denied hours earlier. No one stopped me. The staff I passed gave small nods of acknowledgement. A doorman held the entrance open, a gesture of respect. Good evening, Miss Seward. Good evening, Thomas. I stepped out into the night. The air was cool, clean, a relief after the suffocating tension of the ballroom. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing. Then I started walking. Behind me, the party continued without me. But for the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was free. I woke to 12 missed calls from my mother. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I already knew what they would say, some combination of accusation, justification, and manufactured victimhood, the Seward specialty. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie, then another, then a third. The first, "How could you do this to me?" The second, an hour later, "We need to talk." The third, sent at 3 a.m., nothing, just 3 dots that appeared and disappeared. She'd started typing something and given up. Daniel called at 10 with the update I'd been expecting. The Harringtons had a family meeting this morning, he said. My contact at their law firm heard Bradley was there for 3 hours. The engagement? Still on, for now. A pause. But the prenuptial agreement is being completely revised. Apparently, Eleanor wasn't pleased with how things were represented. I poured myself coffee, watching the steam rise. What does revised mean? It means Natalie no longer has the same access to Harrington assets that she was promised. They're adding contingencies. Lots of them. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired. There's something else, Daniel continued. 3 guests from the party have contacted the Sterling this morning. They want to book events. Really? Apparently, watching you handle that situation impressed some people. One woman said, and I quote, "Anyone who can stay that composed under that kind of pressure is someone I want to do business with." I almost laughed. My family had tried to humiliate me, and instead they'd advertised my professionalism to 200 potential clients. Pam, you still there? Yeah. I set down my coffee. Just processing. You did good last night. You know that, right? I know. But knowing didn't make my mother's 12 missed calls disappear. On the 13th call, I answered. Pamela. My mother's voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying, or yelling. Possibly both. Finally, I've been trying to reach you all morning. I know. You've ruined everything. The words tumbled out in a rush. The Harringtons are questioning the wedding. They're changing the prenuptial. Eleanor barely looked at Natalie this morning. They're talking about reassessing the relationship. I didn't ruin anything, Mom. Don't give me that. You planned this. You bought that hotel knowing Natalie would. I didn't plan anything. I bought the hotel because it was a good investment. Natalie chose to have her party there. Natalie chose to put my name on a blacklist. You chose to watch me get turned away and smile. I kept my voice steady. I just existed. Silence on the other end. You should have told us, she finally said. We're your family. Family asks, Mom. Family includes. Family doesn't put you on a list with instructions to use the service entrance. More silence. I could hear her breathing, could almost see her struggling to find a response. I didn't know you were successful, she said quietly. You never said, you never asked, not once in 8 years. Every conversation was about Natalie, every holiday, every phone call. And when I did try to share something, you changed the subject. That's not... She stopped. I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it. I'm just done pretending, done shrinking myself. Done hoping you'll finally see me. Pamela, when you're ready to have a real conversation about why you've treated me differently for 30 years, I'll be here. But I won't be invisible anymore. Not for you. Not for anyone. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but my voice had been steady. That was enough. 2 weeks later, I received the news through Daniel. The wedding's still happening, he said, but they've changed venues. The Harringtons apparently didn't want to hold it at the Sterling. Too many memories? Too many reminders of the night they realized their future daughter-in-law wasn't exactly who she claimed to be. I was in my office at the new property, a converted warehouse I was developing into a boutique hotel in the Arts District. Plans spread across my desk, a contractor waiting in the lobby. The prenup? I asked. Significantly revised. Natalie doesn't get access to Harrington family assets unless the marriage lasts at least 7 years. Even then, it's limited. I thought about my sister, who'd spent her entire life optimizing for the perfect catch. Now she'd landed her prize, but the terms had changed entirely. She's still marrying him? Apparently. Bradley seems committed, though his mother is making him attend family alignment sessions before the ceremony. Daniel paused. I'm not sure what those are, but they sound unpleasant. I almost felt sorry for Natalie. Almost. What about my mother? No word, but he hesitated. A letter came to the hotel this morning, addressed to you. I had Marcus forward it. The envelope arrived an hour later. My mother's handwriting, careful, precise, the penmanship of someone who'd taken pride in proper correspondence. Inside, a single page. Pamela, I don't understand why you had to do what you did. Part of me thinks you enjoyed embarrassing us. But I also know I haven't been fair. I'm trying to understand why. It's not easy. I'm not ready to talk yet. But I wanted you to know I'm thinking, Mom. Not an apology. Not really. But it was something. I put the letter in my desk drawer and went back to work. 3 months later, I sat in my office at the Sterling, watching the sun set over the city. The new property was nearly ready for its soft opening. We'd booked 6 events for the first quarter. One of them, ironically, was for a client I'd met at Natalie's engagement party, a woman who'd watched the entire confrontation and apparently decided I was exactly the kind of businesswoman she wanted to work with. Strange how things work out. I thought about that night a lot. Not the confrontation itself. That memory was sharp but fading, like a photograph left in sunlight. What I thought about was the moment before. The moment I decided not to hide. For 10 years, I had built my business in silence. Not because I was ashamed, but because I'd learned early that my accomplishments didn't matter to my family. They'd already decided who I was. Nothing I achieved would change that. So I stopped trying. The reveal at the party wasn't about proving them wrong. It wasn't about revenge or humiliation or even justice. It was about refusing to be invisible. That's the lesson, I think. The one it took me 34 years to learn. You can spend your whole life trying to earn the approval of people who will never give it. Shrinking yourself to fit the space they've allotted you. Hoping that one day, if you're successful enough, good enough, enough, they'll finally see you. Or you can stop. You can stop performing for an audience that isn't watching. You can build something real, for yourself, by yourself. And when they finally look up, if they ever look up, you can simply say, I was here all along, you just weren't paying attention. That's not revenge, that's just truth. And sometimes, truth is more powerful than any revenge could ever be. Spring came early that year. I signed the papers on my 5th property in March, a historic inn upstate, not far from where I'd bought my first bed and breakfast 8 years ago. Full circle in a way. Natalie's wedding happened in April. I wasn't invited. I wasn't surprised. But Bradley sent me an email the week before. Pamela, I want to apologize for how things went at the engagement party. I should have said something when Natalie made those arrangements. I didn't, and I'm sorry. Natalie is processing. She's embarrassed, though she'd never admit it. Give her time. For what it's worth, I think what you've built is impressive. Eleanor brings it up at least once a week. I hope you and Natalie can talk someday. Best, Bradley. I didn't reply, but I saved the email. My mother called once a month now. The conversations were short, awkward, full of silences neither of us knew how to fill. But she was trying. In her own way. Last week she asked about the new property. First time she'd ever asked about my business. The historic inn, I said. We're restoring the original Victorian details. Should be ready by fall. That sounds... A pause. That sounds lovely, Pamela. Not praise exactly, but acknowledgement. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had before. I don't hate them, my mother, my sister, the family that spent 30 years looking through me. I just don't need them to see me anymore. I see myself, and that's enough. It took me a long time to understand that, to really feel it, not just say it, but I do now. I'm not the invisible daughter anymore. I'm just Pamela Seward, and I'm exactly who I chose to be. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I see you. I know what it's like to walk into a room full of relatives and feel like you're behind glass, present, but untouchable. I know what it's like to achieve something extraordinary and have no one notice. I know what it's like to wait your whole life for someone to finally look up and say, "I'm proud of you." I also know that you might be waiting forever. Setting boundaries isn't about revenge. It isn't about making people feel bad or proving that you're better than them. It's about respect for yourself. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be dramatic to make a point. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop hiding. Show up as yourself. Speak your truth calmly, and let the people around you decide how they want to respond. Some of them won't like it. Some of them will call you dramatic or vindictive or ungrateful. That's their problem, not yours. Your worth isn't determined by people who refuse to see it. Read that again. Your worth isn't determined by people who refuse to see it, not by the mother who overlooked you, not by the sibling who dismissed you, not by the family that made you feel like you were less. You are not less. You never were. This is Pamela Seward, and I am no longer the invisible daughter. Thank you for staying until the end. If my story resonated with you, please leave a comment sharing your experience. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? How did it go? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. I have more family drama stories coming, some even wilder than this one. Check the description for links to similar stories. I'll see you in the next video.